Hey,
What's up, man?
what's going on, everybody? Saturday night, it's all right with me. We're gonna have some fun tonight. I've been trying to get. I've been wanting to get this guy. I think you've been pretty willing to come on. Just been a little.
Yeah,
little,
look. It ain't like you've been trying to get me, and I've been just like, no.
been a little gunshot, but I know you're a busy man. You're a busy man. You got a lot going on over Deadpit channel. But wanted to reach out. Wanted to finally get you on. This fellow over here, one half of the originators of the Horror Talk radio game. It's been about it's almost 20 years now that you guys started, and nobody was doing this or any of this before you guys. One and only Uncle Bill, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the show.
Thank you all. Thank you. Appreciate it. No, but I mean, it's weird when you say 20 years because that really dates me, and that's fucking sad in a lot of ways. But
you were a youngster when you guys started. You guys were young when you started, so.
Oh yeah, that was crazy, man. It was even if you think about it, like just because we're going to be talking about Romero and everything. If you think about it, when we started doing the show, that's when the Ultimate Edition DVD of Dawn of the Dead came out. It was right around that time.
Yeah,
that we started doing that. If you want to use that for a marker for how long this has been, yeah.
Well, I was, the way I can think of it is that we're almost on the 20-year anniversary of Land of the Dead. That's next year. Yeah. And I remember you guys' first episode where it was a review of the year 2005. And you guys were talking about Devil's Rejects and Land of the Dead and all these movies from that year. So yeah, that's a good way that I keep it in mind of how long you guys have been. Not to think about it too much or anything, but but seriously, man, I'm really glad you came on. Like I mentioned last week before, when I started doing streaming and all this stuff on my channel, and I only do this literally because I discovered you guys and your YouTube show. And I was like, because for the longest time, it was just like, man, I'd love to talk Romero. Could I do a podcast? Yeah, maybe. But hell, everybody's got a damn podcast these days. And, who's going to, want to listen to me talk about George Romero on a podcast, for hours on end?
Quite a lot of people, probably.
More than I ever thought. Like when I first started, like I was like, yeah, maybe I'll get like 100 subscribers or something, and a few people will be interested. But it's amazing all the people that are out there that have a passion and a love for Romero's work and the Dawn of the Dead and all this stuff, and they're just coming out of the woodwork. And I'm happy to so the term influencer gets thrown around a lot. I like to think of myself like a Romero influencer, hopefully inspiring people to check out some movies that they've never seen, one of which we're going to be talking about quite but yeah, it's really rewarding, and I would have never ever thought in a million years that I would be on here putting my fucking face on screen talking about Romero for hours on end, and until I saw you guys, I was like, and the first time I saw you guys,
he's like, shit, if those guys can get on there and do that stuff, I'm bound to be able to do it.
Well, see, the thing is that I just discovered you guys for the first time maybe 2, maybe 3 years ago for the first time. And like I said, you guys been doing it forever. And I'd heard the name Deadpit Radio before, but I wasn't too familiar with it. And which is weird because I'm from Western Kentucky, so I should know a little bit more about it than I did. But you guys on YouTube, I started watching. I was like, man, these guys are funny. That was kind of the first take. I was like, these guys are pretty damn funny. But then when you guys start really getting into it and talking about these movies, I'm like, fuck, these guys know their shit. Like they know what they're talking about and they're funny at the same time. So I was hooked instantly. So it's a big deal for me to get you on here. That's the long way that I'm trying to say this. So thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I've been waiting basically forever for somebody to ask me to talk about Romero. I mean, that's my guy. Like if there is a guy that I have, if there's a director that I look to and I'm like, all right, that's the guy. Like that's the guy that, overall his filmography and everything is the one that I'm like most passionate about. It would be Romero. So I've got no issues talking about like whatever Romero related stuff there is to talk about.
Well, we're going to get it. Like I said, first, the main thing we're going to cover tonight, I guess the main event or whatever. We're going to talk about that new Indicator 4K because you're a big physical media guy. Anybody that watches Deadpit knows you guys are fucking crazy about that physical media. And
physical media.
But I think if you love, I just feel like if you love film, I feel like you have to be at this point because at some point, sooner rather than later, that's really going to be the only way you're going to be able to watch these fucking movies. I'm fairly certain.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about.
got a beef with this one, honestly. I mean, with just one small aspect of this one that I'll talk about when we get into it. With this release, anyway, this is the one that we're going to be talking about. But I do have like one small issue with this
Okay.
that I'll talk about in terms of like you talk about physical media and censorship and things like that and streaming and stuff like that. But there's a part of this release where I was like, that's odd. And I wonder if it's on the other releases, but the only other release that I ever had was like the fucking DVD, the really like, you know,
The original DVD that
DVD.
came out in like 2000, yeah. Yeah, there are a few things about this because I've been through. I just watched in preparation for this tonight. I finally watched the actual transfer, the actual movie last night, and I noticed a couple of weird things I picked out because they also. I don't know if you saw this from Studio Canal put this out over in France.
No, I don't.
Just
I've never even seen that.
few months ago, and so I watched this just the Blu-ray. It's not a 4K; it's just the Blu-ray, and there's not really a whole lot of extras or anything on it. But I did notice from watching this to this UK version, there are some differences in the actual movie itself. So we'll talk about that. But yeah, we're going to talk about that tonight. I want to get into there's a lot that I could talk to Uncle Bill about tonight. So we're just going to see where the hell it goes.
Sure.
Let's check the chat. Let's see who's in here. We got quite a few people in here already. Grande's Graveyard. What's up, man? Uncle Bill on Alpha. Grande's the man. If you like movies, if you like film, and you like hearing somebody passionately talk about film, Grande's the man. Alpha Channel, this is going to be epic. Hope all is well, fellas. Watch my Bruiser 4K today. Very solid transfer. I agree.
I do too.
Did look pretty damn good. The man himself, Synthetic. What's up, man? Good to see you in here. Mr. Matt Landrum. How you doing, brother? Good to see you. And Matt's a buddy of mine. He actually lives in the Atlanta area, so we're gonna be hooking up with him at Days of the Dead coming up here in the beginning of October. Big Romero fan, big Fulci fan, super cool guy. Sean, what's up, man? Good to see you. What's up, all?
I like his profile picture. That's a great album too.
The Merciful Fate. Yeah, Sean's really cool. He's actually from the Braddock area, right outside of Pittsburgh, where they filmed Martin.
Awesome.
Brett, what's up, man? 1911 Guitar Dude. Love the Alpha shopping commercial. The 1978 VW Scirocco shirt sure looks nice. Well, the thing is about that shirt, so if you go to shop.alpharomero.store, there's different designs on there. One of which was a design for the 1978 VW Scirocco, which is, of course, used in Dawn of the Dead. But the fuckers at Volkswagen will not let that slide. I've tried it a number of different ways, and it just gets, they don't
wait a minute. You get that taken down?
Yeah, of all things,
Jesus, man, like that's pretty hardcore. Like, I don't think is that even a thing anymore? Like a model? That's surely not.
No, I mean, shit. I don't.
They just take it down
Scirocco since the 80s. I don't know, man. But it will not. So maybe sometime in the future. But when I was creating those fake models or whatever, I used that shirt, and I've been working on that for a while. It's still not what I wanted it to be, but what the hell. Mayor, what's up, man? Good to see the mayor. CK looks a little different tonight. Well, let me tell you something, buddy. Fuck you.
You can do it. That's all you got to do. It's multiple times.
Let me tell you something. Let's see. Grande said there would be no Grande's Graveyard without Deadpit. Congrats on 10,000 subs. Absolutely, man. Yeah, you guys just hit that 10,000 sub mark. You just had that celebration show the other night. That's crazy. Like, honestly, you guys should have way more than 10,000 subs.
I think so, but I'm biased on it. Like, I mean, it's one of those things where, like, I'm fine with it. I'm grateful for like any that we have, because we did take about 5 or 6 years off, man.
Yeah.
Like where there was absolutely nothing going on. So it's like, yeah, the fact that anybody remembers that time period after that long is pretty cool to me. So yeah.
Well, you guys kind of reinvented yourself. Like, because if you listen back, because like I said, I just discovered you guys a couple of years ago, from your YouTube stuff. And once I discovered that, I joined the Patreon, went back, and I've listened to every episode you guys ever did, because I listened to a lot of podcasts and shit. And there was just a period there where I just listened to you guys nonstop from start to finish.
Jesus Christ. Did you lose your sanity at some point and just start like fucking crying?
I did wake up in cold sweat a few nights there. I was just like,
it's too much.
Yeah. It's like that Eddie Murphy joke where he's like, half, it's just,
yeah, exactly.
But yeah, like listening back, like you guys, it's a completely different type of thing what you guys do now. You guys used to have like the call in portion and go through the
Mhm.
news and
I would love to have the call-in portion now, but unfortunately, the way things are now, you can't really do that. Like, unless you pre-screened all you know what I mean? Because you're gonna have
yeah,
you're gonna have people coming on there and screaming a bunch of stuff and getting you kicked off of YouTube. Back then, if they did that, it didn't matter because it was, it was pre-recorded. So
yeah, that's the thing I do miss about those old shows. It was pretty uncensored, no holds barred.
yeah, and we would probably kept it in anyway, like even if they did. So yeah, you can't really do that now.
Yeah, there was definitely some shit back then that you cannot get away with now,
No, no,
especially on YouTube.
nope.
Bonnie Bailey, how you doing? Good to see you. Nathan Caldwell's in the house watching Night 90 right now. Very cool. Yeah, I've been digging into Night 90 a lot. Just real quick, what are your thoughts on Night 90? And
Okay. I have like a nostalgic piece for that movie because I saw it in the theater with my dad, like when it came out, and like
so you would have
so
been like how old? 10 when that
I
came
was
out?
10 years old. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And
that's the kind
so
of dad that I'm trying to be, man.
yeah, that's the kind of dad he was. And like,
Good dad.
so I'll probably always like that movie more because of that. I'll still though when I go back and watch it, I think it's a solid movie. Like I don't like there's a couple issues with like a couple things in it. I've never particularly liked Patricia Tallman. Like I just don't that much. I think her take on Barbara is better than the than it could have been
Ooh,
in that movie. But Tony Todd's great in it.
yeah.
Tom Towles is great in it.
It's a great
Um,
cast all
yeah,
around. I mean, they William Butler, I think, is pretty good in
yeah.
it.
I mean,
Bill Moseley is Johnny. He is entertaining.
yeah. That fucking dummy looks horrible, man. That always kills me when I see that scene. When he hits the gravestone and stuff, I'm like, Jesus, like
Just
that
kind of
looks
bounces
bad.
up.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
whatever that, however, whoever designed that should have been like fired immediately. I don't know if it, but that's ridiculously bad looking, especially with the rest of the movie looking as good as it does.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's the biggest thing that people kind of talk about with Night 90 is that it's a pretty, for a movie directed by Tom Savini, it's pretty bloodless. And people are, I
Yeah.
think that was the biggest disappointment about it back then. But I
Well,
feel like
had you heard that there's like an uncut version or maybe not an uncut version, but a version that has more
yeah,
gore and things like that in it?
it's the work print version. I actually have that. I tried to put it up on the channel a few weeks back, and Sony was not having that either.
Yeah,
I
imagine
try
that.
to I try to get around as much of the copyright shit as I can to put some stuff up. But yeah, it's a work print version. It's in rough condition. It's got the score to it. It's just a mix of like the score from Halloween 2, some Tangerine Dream stuff, and it's 10 times better than the score that's actually in the movie.
That's
Um,
killer. Yeah, I'm sure it is. Tangerine
that
Dream has actually scored some of my favorite films, including Sorcerer. So
it uses
yeah,
some of the music from Sorcerer. So yeah,
yeah,
but yeah, it basically doesn't just it. Whereas in the theatrical version, it kind of cuts away when there's a headshot or something. It basically keeps all that stuff in, but it's pretty much mostly the same movie. Um, but I know Tom wanted to do way more with that movie than he actually got to. Um,
I'm hoping that I don't know. Isn't Felsher working on that? Wasn't that a thing that was supposed to be happening?
yeah. From all indications, from what I've heard, yeah, he's been working on that. He's actually working on a U.S. release of Bruiser. I can tell
Yeah.
you that for a fact from the horse's mouth, basically.
Well, whenever we talk to Felsher, even if he won't tell us certain things, you can tell by the way he answers questions, like what he's actually doing and what he's not.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
just got to pay attention.
Once you figure out his tales,
Yeah.
you kind of know. Um, Mayor says everybody loves Romero and Dawn of the Dead. Well, except for that Lorne guy.
No, I tell you, T-shirt Joe fucking hates Dawn of the Dead.
That's another guy.
Like,
Yeah, that was. So I don't. Did you watch that stream that I was on with CK on the on Dirk's channel when it was the Dawn of the Dead versus
no,
Zombie?
that was when I was gone. Yeah.
Yeah, you didn't make it, so it was just CK, Texas, THC, Dirk, Darren, and there was a guy on there that I wasn't familiar with. His name's Lorne. Um, but
Oh,
You know what I'm talking about?
I know the guy. Yeah.
Nice guy. I have no issues with him personally or anything, but they were on there just bashing the shit out of Dawn of the Dead. I mean, he was going in, there's no character development. It's poorly written, poorly edited. It's this and that. And I was just watching, like in the middle of the day on a Saturday. I was just like, I'm shaking. I'm just like, I gotta fucking get on there. So I hopped on, and me and Lauren kind of went back and forth.
Did you really? You got on there?
That's I did. Because I think CK at that point was just kind of like, whatever. I'm not putting up a fight.
He's not going to die on the heel of Dawn of the Dead. He's just not going to do it.
No, but
I probably would have, but he's not going to.
Yeah, I was like, man, if UB's not here to put up the fight, then I'm gonna hop on him. So that's
a hot take, man. There's no character development in that film. If anything, I would say that there's like a lot more character development in that film than there is in a lot of horror films, including like Halloween and some of the bigger,
That was my point. Like when he said that, that's when I was like, all right, give me a link. Let me get on here. Cause like, that's the thing that separates, to me, Dawn of the Dead from a lot of horror movies is that the characters, the growth of the characters, the growth of the relationship between the characters. And that's kind of the thing that has lasted all these years. So we got on, we kind of went back and forth, and then we get to Zombie. We're talking about Zombie, and I was like, so what is the great character development that happens in Zombie?
Listen, there's not an Italian horror film that has any character development, so they could just like forget that shit. Another thing, too, I'll just flat out tell you this: like anybody that says the editing in Dawn of the Dead is bad is crazy. Like that's probably the best part of that movie to me is the way that it's edited. So
to me, that's George's, George is a writer, director, but to me, his strong suit or whatever would be his editing. Like when he was editing his own movie, sitting there chain smoking with the flat bed,
Yep.
So yeah, but that was a lot of fun.
If you look at the scenes where they're settling into the mall and they're playing the video games and this and they're doing or they're not video games, the arcade and all that stuff. If you look at the way that that's all edited, you go on like a whole journey in the span of like 5-10 minutes.
Right?
From them like turning into just people trying to survive to like almost like mindlessly like just consumers in that mall like stuff. And that's the way that's edited to show you like that they're just kind of like jacking around and they've got the fur coats on at the end of that scene and they're just they become the thing that they hated it.
And the juxtaposition of that, so like the first, it's like little montage there where they got them all, they have everything, and they're just celebrating. It's very celebratory. It's like, oh, we got everything. We can play the arcades, like Manja. They got the big. They're having a blast. In the Cannes cut, the longer cut, they have that second montage. And I know this is where a lot of people will say, oh, it gets kind of slow and let's get on to the point. But I think it works because that second montage, it's much more subtle. They're kind of just like, all right, well, we got everything. It's like, great. When you finish the roll, we'll drop it off at the drugstore. It's like, okay, reality's starting to set in.
Yeah, but I just don't agree with the take that the editing is bad in that film. I just don't.
I don't know. I don't know where he was pulling that from, but
look at the fuck for that matter. Look at the beginnings. Look at the opening scene. The way that that's edited is like, I mean, you're immediately just there in that apartment complex with those people. You're like following them around. I mean, I think it's just like one of the most masterfully edited openings ever.
Yeah, and
so I don't know.
Yeah, and it's one of those situations too where it's like the editing is so fast and choppy, is what George would call it. So choppy, cover your ass style, that sometimes if it's not done right or done well, it can be kind of like jarring a little bit where you're just like, oh man, there's all this shit going. Because a lot of Dawn of the Dead is just stationary camera shots. There's not a lot of movement. But it's George taking these little puzzle pieces and putting them together, But I don't know. I don't know what the hell he was on that night.
I don't know. That's the interesting. And I'm sure Joe would probably agree with it because Joe's big thing about the movie is it's boring and like that he didn't like the characters either. So I'm not sure. People are coming.
Well, Dirk thinks it's boring too. Dirk is yawn of the dead.
I do not understand that take that it's boring.
I don't either. I can totally understand somebody saying, "Oh, this is kind of cheesy." All the blue face
I can
zombie.
get that.
And
Yeah, I get that.
I understand that. But if I've never, like, I've showed that movie to friends, family, anybody I've ever known, I'm just like, "Hey, we got to watch Dawn of the Dead." And I've heard cheesy or it's a little dated, it's this and that, but I've never heard anybody say, "Wow, this is really boring." They're like, "Oh, this is kind of cool, but it's a little cheesy."
Yeah, I
I
mean,
don't know.
it begins like with action, and it really never stops except the middle part where they're kind of selling in the mall,
Yeah.
like I was talking about. That's the only part where that movie ever slows down, and then the end scene is like just everything, just chaos and going to hell. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I know people see different things in movies, but it's hard to objectively look at that and be like, yeah, that's boring.
It's a weird one, but hey, takes all kinds. Grandison never got more annoyed in his life watching that stream. I'm telling you, dude, I was shaking. I was just like, "This is bullshit. Somebody got to shut this guy down." I was like, "No,
He's
no!"
cussing in his room. I can just see it. Yeah.
And it was like in the middle of the day on a Saturday. I'm just like, "Oh, I'll watch this stream. I hear him talk about zombie because I love zombie too. I'm a Fulci fan too." But they got it. It was just like, Dawn of the Dead's fucking sucks. It's not good. And of course, Mayor and Darren are not fans of Dawn of the Dead either, but they were more like, yeah, it's just not for me, whatever. But the other guy was just like, oh, it's a horribly made movie. And I'm just like, no. Nathan Caldwell says just watched The Dark Half and Bruiser the other day. Two underappreciated Romero titles, I think. Mayor saying that was a rough time. Let's see. Let me try to. It's a good one. Sensei, and what if you distress the Scirocco issue much? Maybe. That's a good good call. I'll figure out a way to get around it for sure, because I thought that was a pretty cool shirt that I threw up there. Favorite? This is my favorite name on all of YouTube. Rick, the North Going Llama. What's up, man? Good to see you in here. It took me a while to figure out what the fuck that said the first time I saw it. I was like, Rick the North Going. I was like, oh, okay. Kind of pieced it together. But good to see you, man. Sean saying, I hope the new Criterion news isn't that they what they teased about Night of the Living Dead weeks ago. Actually, have you heard about this?
I have. I saw something about it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually Criterion's releasing it's like a 40-pack, a 40 movie box set or something like that.
It's isn't it like $600 or something like that? Like,
yeah, it's something crazy, but it's basically like the essential movies of history or whatever the fuck. And Night is included in that. So the Night, I think it's just the Blu-ray is going to be included in that. Which did you ever pick up the Criterion Night of the Living Dead?
I never did. I'm shameful about that for myself, yeah, but I never did. And I've seen it multiple times, and I just never get it. And I couldn't tell you why.
Well, that's the thing about Criterion is it's pretty expensive. Sometimes I'll have those sales where it's like they'll drop it to like $20 for the Blu-rays or something like that. But yeah, so I think that news about the Night Criterion, I think that's what Jim Cirinello was teasing on Facebook a few weeks back. But originally it was like they announced that they were doing a UK 4K release of Night, and everybody was like, "What? This is the news? Fuck the UK." I was like, I don't know, maybe that is. Mayor saying I'm waiting for the Night 90 4K. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's gonna. I guess Sony would be the one to put that out. I don't know if they would do a Blu-ray or a 4K. They're probably gonna do it as a steelbook and put it in Walmart or something like that.
Yeah,
so everything else is going.
That's probably what's going to happen. If I'm still looking for the damn, unless I'm going crazy. Like Return of the Living Dead was supposed to have a 4K steelbook that was going to be in Walmart, and I've never seen that damn thing.
That too. Yeah, I remember hearing that
too. I've
never
seen it. Yeah,
never seen it either. Sensei, I hope you could post that work print someday. Share my music list. Took a lot of work, but yeah, Synth actually went through and figured out every piece of music in the work print version. So there's Jesus. So yeah, he's got I'll figure it out some. I don't know what I'll do. Maybe I'll I told everybody if you're interested in seeing it and you haven't seen it before, I can send it to you, UB, if you're interested. I'll just email it to you. I'll just send you the damn link.
Yeah, I would love to see that actually.
It's actually Lorngate, I survived. That's what it's being.
I'm gonna have to go back and watch that now because I didn't see it. I apparently missed something.
Yeah, it was something. Literally wanted to powerbomb Lauren Gate through the table.
It's just it would be great for me to know too that you are like while he's talking, you're in the back, like in your house somewhere, just like seething, like
Yeah,
and
so
then
like
come on, yeah.
the first 45 minutes of it, I'm just like, this motherfucker. I'm just watching on my phone, just sitting here, just like. And at first, it just builds and builds and builds, and I'm like, oh god, I can't take it anymore. Let's see, where was I? Since saying Uncle Bill's new to me, but I like the cut of his jib. Great takes on Don. Yes, Synth. If you like me, definitely check out Deadpit. Go subscribe at Deadpit on and deadpit.com. Check them out, both of them. And you guys have a Patreon, all kinds of shit. So highly recommend. It's my favorite YouTube channel. Rick's a big fan of Rick's very happy that we get a kick out of his name. Sticks Dive in the house. What's up, man? Hope you're not too shit faced already. Still early. So
is that his gimmick?
I don't know. One night, his gimmick is by the end of the stream, he'll be, gone, and he'll just start asking like, who would win in a fight, so and so versus so and so, and it's just like.
I hope that happens tonight. That would be amazing.
It's always like Goldberg versus, Tom Savini or something like that. It's like, well, that'd be interesting.
Tom Savini with a plate of cheese and
yeah. The only thing I saw was the Creepshow 4K Steelbook at Walmart. Yeah, I think the Scream Factory is re-releasing that. Doing another run of those. So, which I don't. Did you ever get that one? That Steelbook?
I did. I got that pretty much when it came out. Yeah.
I never did. I bought it for that contest that I did for the hell was it, March Madness or whatever. Mm-hmm. But I never actually bought myself a copy. So I think we're about caught up. Oh, here's a new name, Brent Madison. What's up, man? Good to see you. Return to Live Dead 4K Blu-ray out 8/20. All right, so 10
that's
days.
Coming up. Yeah.
Mark your calendars. But good to see you, man. I'm glad you could hop on here.
That's odd to me that I don't have that movie on 4K in any, considering how many times Scream Factory released the damn thing. But that's why I would just rather just get it that way.
Yeah, I don't have it on 4K either.
Same with Creepshow. I didn't have that on 4K until they released that Steelbook, and that's why I bought it.
That Creepshow transfer is pretty damn good. I was really impressed with that. So okay. 10 questions. So we're going to start it off here. We're caught up here on the... so you can answer these. You can go into as much detail, as little or as much as you want. But it's a good way to introduce you guys to people like Synth, who's not familiar with you in Deadpit. Okay. So first and foremost, most basic question. I think we all know the answer to this one if we followed you throughout the years. Number one favorite Romero film?
We just talked about it. We literally is Dawn of the Dead.
All right, there you go. I think it's 3 for 3. I think that's everybody's so far. Number two, best Romero film.
Oh shit!
And I've had 2 different answers for this one, and both I could totally see.
Man, that's impossible though. I mean, I'll try to answer it, but it's like when you say best Romero film, that could mean like so many different things to me.
So like best made or
best directed, best in terms of like
performances, technically, however you interpret best film. If Dawn of the Dead is the best film to you, because to me, I don't think.
Well, okay. I think technically speaking, the one that I would say would be the best would be Creepshow. And think, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was just saying that's one I had Synth on a few weeks back. He brought up Creepshow, and I was like, I never really thought of it, but yeah, technically, like that may be his most complete
Yeah, it's just
all
there's
around.
so many bells and whistles going on in that you don't normally see in movies in general at that time, let alone in Romero movies. Like that, it's to me that's probably his best overall job as a director. It's not my favorite film by any stretch, but like it's probably the best work that he's done, especially for mainstream like
Right,
horror,
yeah.
like a mainstream horror film.
Okay. So I think Larry answered Night Riders, which I'm kind of on board with. I think Night Riders
Yeah,
is a really well made movie. Um,
I mean, I could have picked Martin, I could have picked Night Riders, I could have picked, you know, I could have picked this one in some ways that we're going to talk about, like in terms of that kind of gives away how I feel about it, but like, I mean,
okay,
it's got certain aspects to it that, yeah,
see, we're dropping little teases in there
yeah.
throughout the beginning here. Number 3, least favorite Romero film. I think I might know the answer to this one,
I
but
think you probably do if you've listened to us for any amount of time. The one that I never made it through and I've tried multiple times is Season of the Witch.
oh,
I've
interesting.
tried, uh, I just I never made it through it.
Have you watched the Arrow version?
Yeah, I own the Arrow version, yeah.
Okay, so you've
That's
tried
the
that.
one. It's
Because I
not
was
trust me, it's not the quality. It's
okay,
just
because
there's something about that film.
I Season of the Witch has grown on me over the years. Because the first time I saw it, I was just like, I don't get it. This ain't for me. And I think it was due to the quality because I remember watching it, like renting it on VHS, like that old. Who put that out? It wasn't media. It was I can't remember who put it out, but it was that original VHS that they did with
I
the
know the one, yeah.
crazies. Um,
Yeah.
and it just looked like shit, and I was just like, I can't follow this. But it was cleaned up, and you kind of tell what the hell they were talking about, and what the point was. It was because it's not really a horror movie; it's more of a feminist, psychological. I
It
don't know what you
is,
call
and
it.
that's the thing that I kept trying to watch it, and I'm like, it's like watching an episode, like an old episode of Sally Jesse Raphael or something. Like, just a bunch of conversations with middle-aged women, like and I'm just like, I I've gotta tune this out. But that being said, I have only seen Survival of the Dead one time, and I will never watch it again, so it's hard for me to, like, say if that might also be the worst as well.
Yeah, I know you're not a big fan of survival to the point where you and CK were gonna do a watch along, and I think because I think Carter Detention or somebody requested it, and you were just like, "I'm not watching this," and you guys
I
ended up
just
watching something else.
I flat out will say I'm not watching that movie again. Like it's never gonna happen. I don't give a shit. You can pay me whatever, but it's not gonna happen.
Uh, all right. Where are we at? 4. Okay, most underrated Romero film.
This one, Bruiser.
Bruiser. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it used to be Martin, but I think a lot of people have caught up on Martin
Mm-hmm.
recently with all these like releases and the kind of treatment that it got. Uh, another one. There's a lot of his films that I think are that way too. Though Night Riders is another one.
See, Night Riders is one. If you would have asked me like five, 5 or 10 years ago, I would say
Yeah,
easily Night Riders. But I feel like Night Riders is getting a lot more attention and a lot more respect these days than it used to. Like, back when I first started watching this shit and first discovered Romero, Night Riders was just kind of that movie that was like, oh, it's just Romero. It's not even a horror movie. Like, don't even bother. I'm just like, okay. So it's kind of one of the last ones I watched, and I finally watched it, and I was like, this is actually pretty good. Like,
that's a great film. Yeah,
yeah.
it's there's something about that film that's very like you can tell that's he put his heart into that movie. Like that
Hmm.
was kind of him
Yeah.
in that movie. And if you would have asked me before that stupid ass remake came out, it would have been The Crazies too. That movie was underrated for years and years and years, and then the remake came out and everybody like kind of went back,
Yeah.
watched it,
Yeah.
and it kind of caught on.
Crazies is a good one. Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of with you. There's a lot of movies. I mean, me personally, because I'm just a huge fan and I just love most of his stuff. I mean, I'm kind of with you on Survival. Like, it's not the greatest, but there are parts of it that I like. Um, but
Yeah, I know that there's people that champion that film. It's got its own like audience of people. I know that. Um, but for me, like watching Diary of the Dead and Survival of the Dead is like a painful fucking experience to try to do because it's like that's how he ended his career, And I'm just
yeah,
like, Damn, man. But they all, if you think about it, they all ended their career horribly. If you look at all the big guys like Hooper and Argento, even though he's not ended it yet, he kind of has. And,
Craven,
Craven and
Carpenter, even. I mean,
Carpenter's like, I don't even know what the hell Carpenter's doing anymore, but yeah, it was all
Cronenberg.
ended.
Cronenberg's kind of the one that's hit or miss here recently. Like Crimes of the Future. Have you seen Crimes of the Future yet?
No, I want to, though. I just want to get a really good 4K of it, and sit down and watch it.
Yeah, I just got the Blu-ray not long ago, and I just watched it for the first time. I made it halfway through. I had to go back and finish it. It's okay. It's not the great. I prefer Brandon Cronenberg's films.
I do too at this point.
Yeah.
Amazingly, yeah. I mean, Possessor was like one of my favorites, and yeah, I mean, that Second Sight release, that film is insane.
Mm.
And then Infinity Pool.
Like, Infinity Pool is just very memorable.
Going on, yeah. That's the movie where you're just like, you're just amazed at what you're watching throughout the whole thing. You don't even,
yeah.
yeah.
You don't know what the hell you're watching, but anytime, I'll say this: anytime that I spit on the ground, I instantly think back to Infinity Pool. I'm just like, oh yeah, that one scene.
Yep.
Let's see. Favorite performance in a Romero film? Question 5.
Scotty in Dawn of the Dead.
Oh, Scott. Okay, that's a good one.
Followed up closely by Pilato in Day of the Dead, probably.
Yeah, I think Larry and Synth were both Pilato on that one, which it's hard to beat. Favorite non-Romero zombie film?
Favorite non-Romero zombie film? It's tough, man. There's so many zombie films.
Non-Bruno Mattei. We'll make it even.
I hadn't even put him in that equation. I mean, I enjoy his films, but damn. God. There's so many. See, I'm going back and forth between Fulci and Return of the Living Dead. And if I'd be lying if I didn't say it was Return of the Living Dead, because it probably is. That's probably the one I've seen the most. If not that, then it would be, City, probably from Fulci.
Okay. See, I don't remember. Were you a fan of Shaun of the Dead?
Oh yeah. Well, here's the funny thing about that movie. Now, when I first saw it, I saw it in the theater when it came out, and I didn't get it at all. Like, I don't know. I couldn't tell you why.
Wow.
But my mindset was like, from watching the trailers and things like that, like I thought it was going to be something completely different than what it was. And honestly, I don't know if anybody can go in that movie and know how that movie was going to be. You know what I mean? And be prepared for it.
Yeah.
To get all the in jokes and everything that was going on. So I didn't like it. And I remember we watched it, like CK and I watched it together, and like I was just like, everybody was talking about it and everything. I was like, I don't understand the hype. Fast forward to, when it hits DVD and all that stuff, and like I've probably watched that movie 20 or 30 times. Like, it's just infinitely quotable and rewatchable, and yeah,
it is. Like that's I'm kind of with you. Like, I've seen that so many times, and I just watched it again recently. I did a stream about a month or so ago doing my top 10 non-Romero zombie films, and I had that at 2. And so I went back and rewatched it to make sure. I was just like, is it as good as I remember? And like, yeah, it's still flawlessly written. Like, the pacing is perfect. Like, it never slows down instantly. Yeah. It's just so good. But yeah, Return is hard to beat. Even though Romero was not a big fan of Return of the Living Dead.
No, he hated it. But I mean, I still don't know why.
Well, I think it had to do. I think it came out like right around the same time as Day of the Dead, and it kind of fucked Day of the Dead. In his mind. I don't know if it really did or not, but
I mean, it's hard for me to say anybody objectively watching that movie would be like, this sucks. It's hard for me to like think that person exists, but I mean, I'm sure there are some people that hate it.
I don't know of anybody that dislikes Return of the Living Dead. I know some people that just don't love it, but I've never heard anybody just say like, "Oh, that movie's fucking terrible." Like, it's another one that's like perfectly paced, perfectly cast, hilarious dialogue. I mean, it's hard to beat. Number 7, favorite Romero score or soundtrack?
Shit. Okay. All the Harrison stuff, I love. And so like it would be like that's impossible, dude. I used to drive around and just listen to these scores like when CDs were a thing, right? I would
Yeah,
burn
yeah.
CDs and like drive around and listen to them. So it's like impossible for me to pick this. But I mean, it would be a three-way tie between Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, and Creep Show. I know that, Harrison didn't do Dawn of the Dead, but still.
Nope. Am I here?
Nope.
Is this working?
Yeah, it's probably me.
Well,
It's
no, we
probably
got
my
two new
internet.
laptops. So. No, my internet's the drizzling shits out here, so I don't know what to tell you. Last week I just completely dropped my internet, just completely died. So if it just falls on you, just fill some time until I can get shit figured out. I'm
I can
working
do
on
that.
it. But yeah, I think the Harrison stuff, Creep Show, Day of the Dead. I mean, it's hard to beat. And a lot of people didn't and still don't like the Day of the Dead score. They think it's a
It's
little too Caribbean
Yeah,
sounding
I mean, it's
parts. Like,
completely different, but like to me, it's really, really effective and really kind of brilliant
mm-hmm.
for what he was trying to do.
Yeah, I completely agree. Number 8, favorite Romero. Here we go. You're a physical media guy. Favorite Romero release on physical media.
That second sight, Dawn of the Dead,
Yeah,
4K.
that's pretty
I
hard.
mean, that's
Although, I mean, still to this day, that Anchor Bay box set is
yeah.
still kick ass, and it still
I
looks
mean,
good
okay,
too.
if you want to go to like nostalgia, then that's it. Like it's either that Day of the Dead one that opens up,
Mm-hmm.
or the
Yeah,
Dawn of the Dead
yeah.
Ultimate Edition. It's one of those two. If you're talking about like ones that like I was just crapping my pants about that they finally came out, like that would be those two. If you're going on like for me, like in terms of technically how it looks and like
Mm-hmm.
how much of an improvement it was, it'd probably be that Dawn of the Dead second side.
Yeah, that one's pretty hard to be. I mean, that's pretty much everything that you would need outside of like maybe like the extended mall hours cut. They didn't throw that in there, but every other documentary, everything else that's been, it's pretty much in that box set there. Um, okay, here's a non-Romero number 9. So we know uh, you are on YouTube. Do you have a favorite horror YouTuber or podcast? Something that you watch all the time that you follow?
Um,
Other than me, of course.
you of course, yeah. You know, I don't watch that many podcasts. Because I've been doing this for so long, and like the last thing I want to do in my spare time is listen to horror podcasts. But if I'm being honest, but like the ones. Here's the ones that I really enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
No shit. Like I listen to Dirk's
Mm-hmm.
subjective perspective because I like all the giallo stuff, and he goes into like deep dives about the giallo stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Grande's great because his energy level is like out the fucking roof.
He
So
just
like,
cuts a promo for 2 hours, basically.
yeah, I mean it's like watching him, you just get tired just watching him, but it's great. Like because I mean he's
Mm-hmm.
got so much information about everything. So his stuff is great. Um, who else do I watch on like a regular basis? I don't watch any of the big like name ones that people would probably know.
I don't
Um,
either.
um, I'm gonna leave somebody out and like piss somebody off so badly that it's gonna.
Yeah, this is
I
a bad
watch,
question to ask.
yeah, I watch Rambo all the time, but
Yeah.
his is not horror related, but he covers horror a lot.
Oh, he's everything. One time I watched that motherfucker review an episode of what was it? Darkwing or Duckwing or what was that?
They
Stupid
get
DuckTales or something. I don't know.
so his gimmick is that like he'll review anything that anybody like will but pays him to review, right?
Mm-hmm.
So people are insane, man, and they'll just torture him with like stuff. They'll have him watch like the Dolly Parton Christmas special or something, and he has to watch it. Like, and it's just he's got all this weird, stuff that's on there, and it's awesome to watch him review it.
I know 'cause he'll post something. I'll just be like, he's like, oh, I'm watching, an episode or season 2, episode 4 of something, and I'm just like, what the fuck? Who requested that?
I'll tell you somebody who's great, man, and who's kind of like to me like a logical extension of what we do, but like younger, or what we did, but like younger. he's a great interviewer too. Probably one of the best interviewers
I know
is
who you're talking
Christian.
about. Yeah,
Christian
Planet
Hanna.
CHH.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he is insanely good at what he does.
Yeah, I've had people mention him in the chat before too, and I've said the exact same thing because the interviews that he did with you and CK is brilliant. I mean, he's really, really good, like you said, at interviewing. Like that's a
Yeah.
big strong man. He's um,
Now that was horror related though, mostly. So there's
yeah,
other podcasts I don't want to leave out like people, but I was just trying to stick to horror related, Garrett.
yeah.
Don't
You're
fucking freak out,
I was,
Garrett. Don't freak out.
I was about
Born
to
to be
say
rad.
you're about to
Born
get
to
a
be-
message from Born to Be Rad, and he's
Yeah.
like, what the fuck, Uncle Bill? But yeah, I'm not a big fan of like the bigger ones either. That's why like I think I was drawn to you guys because I would like look on YouTube for stuff and it would just be like I know you guys talk about like the dead meat and stuff like that every night. It's just like it's well done or whatever, but it's just it just doesn't feel real to me. Like it just doesn't I don't know. Didn't click with me, but
There's a couple like that. Grim Collective that's hugely popular, and then there's the Dead Meat. And I don't watch any of that. It's not my thing.
Okay, last question.
Oh, wait. One more.
Oh, we got
now that I think about it. And he's
Deadass
really
on deck.
good. It's really good. How'd you know?
I knew.
Yeah. No. It's Sean Clark's.
Okay.
Sean Clark's podcast. I mean, I really think that he does a good job on that podcast too.
Yeah, I've watched a few episodes of that. I'll admit I'm not the biggest Sean Clark fan. There's just
a lot of people like he rubs them the wrong way.
Yeah,
And I get it, but like I've known the guy for almost 20 years, and it's like, I mean, you've been around somebody that long, you kind of know like how they are really as a person versus maybe like how they come off, and he's a good guy.
Yeah, I've never met him, but I don't know. There's just a vibe sometimes, and some of the things he says. I don't think he means to say it the way he does or come off the way he does, but I don't know. I know.
Yeah, I mean, I know
not a big fan either, but
I know there's been certain situations where like on people's shows where he's come off really, really badly, and I'd heard about that. And yeah, I mean, I can't defend everything that he does, but I just know that like the dude has been really, really good with us, really cool with us for a long time. And I do like that.
I was gonna say, like, I remember going back and listening to those old episodes on Patreon, and him popping up like from years and years ago. Before I think it was even before like the whole Walking Dead stuff. And all that.
Yeah.
So, but last question, final question of the 10 questions here with Uncle Bill. Team Harry or Team Ben? Who was right?
Jesus Christ. What a question. Ben, man. I mean, what the fuck are you gonna do? Like, that's an incredibly difficult question.
I've had tons of different answers on this one from people. Everybody's completely split. Even though Harry's kind of an asshole, but
he's got a point though. But I mean, I'm trying to think like, okay, I'm trying to envision in my mind what would happen in that movie if everybody would have just listened to him.
Well, I thought about this the other day because I'm insane like that.
I mean, seriously, it's a legitimate question. Like, how would that movie have played? Or realistically, maybe not the movie, but like in real life, if they would have listened to him and it's like everybody gone down there, what would have happened?
What I think would happen, I think people kind of forget about, is that Karen Cooper was down there bitten. She was a ticking time bomb. So if she came back while everybody was down there, who knows what would have happened? It would have been a feeding frenzy. It could have just created even more chaos than what they would have encountered staying upstairs. So I think that's an aspect that a lot of people don't take into account, is the fact that, she in a few hours is going to be, coming back. So I don't know. That's why I asked it. It's an open-ended question because there's really no wrong answer to it. And that's the beauty of that movie to me.
Me personally, like I don't want to be trapped, just like he was saying, and I don't want to be trapped with my back against the wall, where you don't have
Mhm.
any way of getting out if something were to happen. I'd rather like stay in an open space where you can run, do something, try to get away. Like if not, you're just stuck. Like, I
Yeah, I
mean,
think kind of what he ended up doing was kind of the best option, is staying up and fighting until there's no other option. Then, but then at the same time, I don't know. I think about this way too much. Uh,
this is like some real nerd shit here for both of us. Yeah, go ahead.
but at the same time, it's like all that noise that they made boarding up the windows and shit drew more
That's
zombies
true.
to the house than there really should have been.
You think about 92 though, that door wasn't breached. Remember they had to go through it with a chainsaw? So
Mm-hmm.
like they never got into that fucking basement. So I mean, it's not really like approached in the original, like what would
Mm-hmm.
what ultimately would have happened with that. But like in 90 they don't get down into the basement.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that means anything. That means he would have kind of been right. I mean, Harry would have been right.
Well, in 1990, they actually had an attic, so there was a third option. So
That's true. Yeah.
that's probably the best option.
Yeah.
But Anne Frank style.
Yeah. I wonder what. Yeah, that would have changed that whole movie. Now
Yeah.
think about it. The original night, if they had an attic, that movie would have been over in like 10 minutes.
And in 1990, it was just like at the end, and everything's going to hell. He's just like, all right, I'm going to go up here in the attic. And it's like, where did the attic come from? They
By the
never
way, now
even
that you mentioned that, why did everybody not just get in the attic now that I think about it?
I don't know. I guess only Harry knew about the fucking attic by the end. All right, let's see. Let me just catch up on some comments here. We can see how people are reacting to Uncle Bill's top 10 here. Stuka is saying he hasn't started drinking yet. He just clocked out. So give him about an hour or so. We'll get the party going. Mayor saying Night Riders, I guess for underrated Romero film. Will, what's up, man? It's my buddy Will. Yes, Season of the Witch. I didn't know you hated Season of the Witch. But he agrees. Not a big fan of Season of the Witch. Insane Survival is the roughest. Yeah, this is one aspect of survival I'll agree with. Kenneth Welch, the guy that plays the old Irish guy.
Yeah,
His performance.
He is good.
He's entertaining to watch at least. Whereas like the Alan Van Sprague guy, the main character, I've never understood why George put him in everything in those last 3 movies.
Well, fucking yeah, I was thinking about this the other day too. You and talk about something that's kind of like nerdy too. Think about why I don't like Land of the Dead that much.
Mm.
And one of the main reasons is that fucking dude. Well, besides John Leguizamo, who I just hate him. Just
Not a Johnny Legs.
No, in anything he's in, I hate him. But with the exception of maybe Carlito's Way, but the guy that they had playing, what was his name? Simon
Baker.
Simon
Baker.
The most flat, just unlikable dude. And that's the guy that's carrying your movie. It's like that's not going to work.
Well, originally George wanted that was originally supposed to be cast for a black character. It was supposed to be a black character, but the studio didn't want a black guy. They wanted your white meat, literally white meat baby face.
Well, yeah.
And so George was like, all right, well, I'll make Big Daddy the main real good guy in this movie, the black character. So
yeah.
So that was kind of, I think that was studio forced on George to put somebody like a Simon Baker in there. But
I mean, everybody else around that dude is so much better than him in that movie too.
Yeah.
It's the one thing that I just noticed. Like,
like Robert Joy.
Yeah.
He's great.
He's great. Audrey Argento is fine. Like, I mean, doing what she's doing. He's just like, just completely unlikable.
Just one level. Yeah, I agree. Saying Night Riders is his favorite non-zombie Romero film. The call says, tried watching Zone of the Dead yesterday. I've never even heard of that. Couldn't get through it. Try again. Well, if you couldn't get through it on one, well, I'm probably not going to watch that either. I've never even heard of that.
Hey, you should try watching Festival of the Living Dead if you want to try to get through something.
Jesus Christ. What do you think about, we'll go and bring that up, since we're talking about shitty zombie movies banking off the Romero name. What are your thoughts on this Queens of the Dead that are coming up that Tina Romero is working on currently.
Well, from reading the synopsis of it and seeing some of the pictures of it, like I don't think that's going to set the world on fire. Um, I some of there's a lot of people defending that movie because they're like, this is what Romero was all about. He was about pushing the boundaries and like using things that most mainstream directors wouldn't use in films, talking about that aspect of the movie and everything. And I'm
Mhm,
like, fine, but it's like it just looks fucking stupid. At the end of the day, like that idea is stupid. I don't care who the hell's in it. It's just a stupid idea. And the
mhm.
look of it from what I've seen is not good. So I don't know. It's like you can't criticize that movie because people come out of the woodwork and start to like attack you for like what that you're criticizing. But at the end of the day, it just doesn't look like it's going to be any good.
No, yeah, I'm kind of with you. Like Tina Romero's, from all accounts that I've seen, interviews, she seems like the nicest person in the world. Apparently, she's been trying to get this. She's been wanting to make this for years.
That's the other part of it. It's been like, an idea for I don't even know how many years now. So that's not a
Yeah,
good sign either.
but yeah, I don't have very much, especially after seeing that Festival of the Living Dead shit. I was just like, I'm just kind of like, like, by the time George was making Survival, and his joke was, I wanted to call it Enough of the Dead. Like, I'm just kind of done. Like,
Yeah.
kind of in that spot. Twilight of the Dead, though, I guess that's not happening anymore because they got Brad Anderson from Session 9, or he was supposed to
Yeah.
direct it. And that had some hope because at least they had gotten an actual, proven filmmaker behind it. But yeah, I don't know. Not very high hopes.
No.
Since Sandy grew up on Cronenberg, his later stuff not as good. What is? Do you like any of Cronenberg's later stuff?
Yeah. When you say
Like,
later stuff, like I kind of
like
define it. He's got like three different eras to me, right? He's got
yeah,
the early body horror stuff. He's got that mafia stuff in that middle area, and then he's got this crazy shit that he's doing now. That's like
yeah.
psychedelic body horror or something. So I mean, I like him in different ways all the way through his career, but probably his early stuff is my favorite, of course, and then the middle stuff I really love too.
Mm-hmm. Are
The
you?
you know he,
Sorry, are you a fan of Naked Lunch?
you know somebody's gonna kill me for saying this. I've never seen that movie. That
You
is
should see it.
that's Slippy's favorite film of his too. I know it is
Really?
because we've talked about it. Yeah. And he like couldn't believe I hadn't seen it either. And I've just never. That's one I've never seen.
I'd never seen it. I found the Criterion release Blu-ray of that at a local store here. It was used fairly cheap. I was like, "Hey, I've never seen it. I'm gonna pick it up. I'll watch it." I watched it, and it may be in my like top 5 at least Cronenberg films now because it's really really freaking good. It's completely different. It's pretty fucking out there even for Cronenberg, but I think you should definitely check it out. I think you might like it.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
gonna have to at some point.
um, see, Brett says I share George's love for Shaun of the Dead. It's me and my wife's favorite non-Romero zombie film. Yeah, that was Sean's one that George was not a big zombie movie guy. Like he didn't watch every zombie movie that came out. But Shaun of the Dead was one that he championed for a long, long time there. Sorry, I'm skipping over some comments here. I'm trying to catch up, guys. Grande saying thank you so much, UB. I know Grande is a huge fan of you guys, so that means a whole. Here we go. Just don't say dead meat, Uncle Bill.
Don't worry. I won't.
You're gonna get the dead meat audience after me.
The Dead Meat Army.
Yeah, the dead meat army. Dalton Gibson, what's up, man? That's a new name. Good to see you as an Appalachian who no longer lives in Appalachia. It's always nice to hear you be in my ear holes. Yeah, that's another thing too. You guys get a lot of shit for your accents too, your Eastern Kentucky accents, but it's comforting to me. I grew up in Western Kentucky. It's a completely different world than Eastern Kentucky in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of similarities there.
Yeah, I mean, I always say like you got to give it about 15 minutes of listening to me or even CK for that matter. Because immediately when you hear it, it's very grating and it's very like you're not used to that kind of accent. But after about 15 minutes, you kind of settle into it. It's fine. If you
Yeah,
get used to it.
it becomes almost soothing in a way. I'll say that. Um, but yeah, I'll say this: it's gotten a lot better. When you guys first started, it's like what did Lou Perryman say? It's like, damn, don't even sound like you boys have been to town yet.
That's one of my favorite moments in any show where he says that. It's him. He's like sounds like he's from like Texas and he sounds
Yeah,
as and he's saying doesn't sound like you guys get to town that often or something like that. Yeah,
that's
which
one of my
killed
favorite.
me.
I use that all the time. It's like, god damn, that dude doesn't even look like he's been to town yet.
Yeah.
But speaking of like interviews and stuff that you guys have done, you guys actually did interview George Romero in 2007. I wanted to bring it up, talk about it. How did that come about? Like, who set that up? Did you reach out to George? Like, how did that come about? Because you guys did like it was a 3-part interview and it was pretty in depth. And like I said, I went back and listened to it earlier this week because I in preparation for the show and I'll say like I said I've listened and watched a lot of George's interviews over the years, and that you can definitely tell when George is just kind of going through the motions and kind of giving the the usual answers, to the usual questions that people are asking. But you guys really kind of went deep in pretty much his entire career. So, how did that come about? Like, were you
Well,
freaking the fuck out like I would be?
yeah,
Or
yeah, man. Like, there's 2 interviews that we ever did where like we were nervous wrecks behind the scenes, and it probably is like apparent at some point in both of those interviews, like that we were, but it was Carpenter and Romero. So
mm,
Carpenter was like CK's big, like that was his thing, right? And I mean, I'm a huge fan of Carpenter too, but Romero was mine. So like
mhm.
we got to interview both of our like kind of like legends in terms of horror, and like it was equally nerve wracking in both instances. In the instance of Carpenter, it was just like I sent an email back when he had a website to his website with just like a where they have the email contact me at whatever, because back then you could do that and people like didn't get 50 million requests or whatever. And a couple of days later, he's like, "Yeah, I'll do it. Whatever." What the fuck? It's like that was it. With
Did you
Romero,
did you
oh, sorry.
mention? Sorry, I just wanted to. Did you mention Kentucky at all? That you guys were from Kentucky or
I
anything like
I
that? Did
think
you,
we did, and also I think that like that was before I knew how much he hated Kentucky. I think we were trying to bond, and then come to find out like the dude fucking hated like living in
yeah,
Kentucky, yeah, in Bowling Green and all that. But was he from Owensboro or Bowling Green? I always get those
Bowling
two like
Green.
mixed up. Bowling Green,
Bowling Green.
okay,
My
because I
buddy
could,
Will is
yeah,
actually from Bowling Green. He actually had he take you on a tour of like all the because in all the Carpenter's movies he mentions streets and towns from
yeah,
the area, and his childhood home is like right on the campus of Western Kentucky University. So they said they have like a plaque there that's showing like John Carpenter's childhood home and stuff. So
yeah. I don't remember if it's in the interviewer or if it's before the interview, but I'm pretty sure that one of us mentioned that we were from Kentucky, and I don't.
mm,
As you can imagine, it didn't get the response where it was like, oh, awesome, you know.
he was like,
Uh,
oh,
with Romero, I'm a little bit hazier on Romero because I'm pretty sure that CK set that up more so, and I can't remember if we went through Felsher, if we even knew Felsher at that time, or if it was like some other way. So I'm not sure how at this point, almost 20 years later, I'm not sure how that one got set up. I do remember though vividly when we first get on the call and like hearing his voice and everything like that,
mm-hmm.
and freaking the fuck out. And you can probably like pick that up
Mm.
if you listen to the interview. Um, and just through the interview, like through the process of doing it, like getting calmer and calmer because like it's apparent that he is getting more and more comfortable with us and we're getting more and more comfortable with him. And then it just sorts to kind of flow, as that
Yeah,
kind of happens too.
yeah. I want to say, how did you guys meet Felsher to begin with? Because I remember going back and listening to those episodes. It seems like he was there from damn near the beginning.
He was there from pretty much the beginning. I'll tell you a story about Felcher that I don't think I've told, maybe to one or two different people though. Back when we were doing, here's how I actually met Felcher. back when we were doing the horograph thing where we would do through the mail autographs, like this was 2003, 2004. I wrote to him because he had worked on like a bunch of the special features for like, different
Yeah, he was like
films that
working
we
for
had.
Anchor Bay at the time.
Yeah, he was working for
Yeah.
Anchor Bay at the time. And I wrote to him and like requested an autograph and everything. And that was my first contact with him because he sent me like an autograph back. And then it was probably, years later, 3 or 4 years later when we were doing the show and like he brought that up at some point. He mentioned it that like I don't really think it was on a show, but he mentioned that he knew like
Mm-hmm.
that I had sent him that, and like that was one of the only like fan things that he had gotten sent.
That's what I was gonna say. I bet he got a
Yeah,
fucking kick out of that. He's just like, who the fuck is sending for an autograph of me? Like he's just sitting there
yeah.
fucking. It's like, all right.
I mean, but it was awesome. So, I mean, that's my first interaction with him, and it's just bizarre. It's one of those things that's bizarre, man, because like at that time when sent that to him, we had no idea we were going to do a show or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
It was just we were just huge horror fans that were trying to get like autographs from certain people, and
So I want to say, so it was Horrified. What inspired you guys to start the show? I think it was you guys were going to Horrified. Was that
Yeah,
like the
there
first
was a
convention you
show.
guys went to or something?
I don't know if people even are familiar with this show nowadays because it's been out of commission for a long time. But there was a show in Baltimore, Maryland called Horrified.
That's right.
And in 2004, that was the first convention that we ever went to. And that convention was I'm fairly certain, you can look it up, but I'm fairly certain that was like the Dawn of the Dead Ultimate Edition kind of like release convention. At least that's what they were promoting pretty heavily there. And so like Anchor Bay had tables there, and like that was the big thing that they were like doing. I think that was in August that show was. I'm fairly certain it was. And I think that disc came out a couple months after that. But
Yeah,
you fact check me on that. But
it
like I
was
think
because
so.
I got it for my birthday, 2004,
Okay.
October 2004. Yep, I
Okay.
remember specifically going to the store and buying that for my birthday.
Okay, so that
a big
was
moment in my life.
That was my introduction to, and there probably won't be another one that to me is that good because like number one, that's your first kind of encounter with all these people, and it was a Dawn of the Dead reunion. That was the big like thing there. But number two, they were promoting the Ultimate Edition of Dawn of the Dead, which was the thing like everybody was waiting on forever at that point because it had been out of print for ever at that time, on DVD. And yeah, that was kind of the catalyst for starting the show because like we marked out so much at that show and met so many people that we didn't know existed that liked the genre and things like that, I think after that is when the idea of like CK started to kind of like germinate with him, like, and I say this and it's true because I remember this. I don't know, like, he kind of disputes this. I don't know if he called it a podcast or not. I don't even, because he said he didn't know what a podcast was at that time.
I don't even think that was a thing back then.
Yeah, I know he was listening to wrestling shows at that time. So whatever the frig you want to call that, like wrestling shows on the internet, okay? And that was the other part that was the inspiration. I know that because I remember him talking about it. Like that was like another part that kind of like he wanted to do a horror themed show that was similar to those kind of like shows that he was listening to related to wrestling. So
yeah, like in 2004. I mean, I don't think podcast was even a word at that.
Yeah,
not that I knew of.
So it may not have been. I went on CHH's show and called it a podcast, and like it started a fucking war because he said he didn't know. But I don't know. Whatever you want to call that at that time.
Yeah.
Internet radio.
Internet radio is kind of the term that I remember hearing back in the day. It was like an internet radio show. I'm like, what the hell is that? And it would be like this poor quality thing you would hear and be like, all right, it'd have to load and buffer and all this other shit.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I don't even think podcast was a word. But you mentioned you talking about convention. So Horrified was that your first convention that you guys ever went to?
Yes, both of us. Yeah.
So you mentioned you mentioned your dad earlier. I remember you telling a story about taking your dad to a convention because your dad was a real big fan of a lot of
He
horror movies and
was
stuff.
he was a he was a huge fan of Dawn of the Dead. I'd say that was probably his favorite horror film as
Mm,
well. In 2005, I went back to Horror Find with Dad. Like that, we
mhm,
both went together, and that year, Coscarelli. No, that year was Bruce Campbell, Coscarelli. Um, Galen Ross was there. I do remember that because there's a picture of my dad with Galen Ross. I don't know if they did like another Dawn reunion or if it was just a couple of people.
Well, you got to think at that time, 2004, you had that Anchor Bay come out, you had the remake coming out, you had Shaun of the Dead was kind of a big thing. So I mean, Dawn of the Dead was kind of hot again at that time. So I'm sure they were
Yeah.
everywhere at that time.
Yeah. So the 2005 show, we went back, and it's funny because I've still got pictures of dad with like Jeffrey Combs and Galen Ross and like, all these people from that show. Like, yeah. And that was a great show too, except for the fact that I waited in line to meet Bruce Campbell for probably like 4 hours. It was so bad that like me and dad had to switch like like
Hold my
what
spot. Yeah.
yeah, like one of us just had to leave and like the
Yeah.
other one came back. And I don't think I'll ever do anything like that again. But at that time, you didn't know that that wasn't something that was like typical. You know?
Yeah. Especially the way it is now. Uh, I mean, I know I saw you at Horror Hound in Cincinnati back in March, I think. I think
Yeah,
that's the one only time I've ever met you in person.
yeah.
Um, do you go to many conventions outside of that?
I started going back now, like because I don't know. I started going to scare. I didn't go for years because I
Mhm.
just got burnt out on them, and they suck now. To be frank, like they're just the prices are insane, and the people are crazy, and like it's just all a bunch of like carny stuff now. But like I started going back to Scarefest, and that's the local one here in like Kentucky. It's in Lexington,
Mhm.
and I don't know, like going to the vendors and stuff like that and meeting like all these people would come in from different states that that we knew and that kind of got it back to where I started thinking about going again. And then the Whorehound show that I went to, oh, that was a pretty awesome time. So yeah, I'm planning on going back to Scarefest again this year. I don't think I'll go to Whorehound because I just don't like the lineup. Like the lineup is kind of not my.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a little weak. I'm kind of with you. Like, I'm not a huge convention guy. Like, I don't just go constantly and just spend thousands of dollars on photo ops and all this stuff. Like, I couldn't. There's no friggin' way that I could do that. But there is something enjoyable about just kind of being around your people. People
Yeah,
that speak the same language. Type of thing. But I got to get you to Living Dead weekend.
I would love to go to that show. I wanted to go with CK when he went.
Hmm.
But, like, there's a bunch of stuff. I mean, there was no way I could have gone because we were going on vacation after that and everything, and I couldn't have taken off anyway to go and do 2 things like that.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I've been to, uh, Pittsburgh. I've been to the cemetery. I've done all that stuff. It just wasn't around Living Dead weekend or
Yeah.
anything like that. So, yeah, I would love to do that.
Yeah, you got to do it, man. Next year, next June, come up there because I know I think it's just going to be a Dawn Day Land 20th anniversary. Which you can meet, Eugene Clark, and he can try to
Is
sell you
he
as much shit as possible.
I'm gonna
Uh,
tell you the truth, I would probably buy one of his CDs. If he's got one of those CDs, I would
oh, dude.
probably buy it.
Oh, I guarantee, and he'll sell you 10 other things while you're at his table.
Yeah.
I met him in 2008. That was the first convention I went to. It was in Dallas, Texas. It was Texas Frightmare Weekend, and it was kind of the same. There was a Dawn reunion, a night 40th anniversary reunion, and Eugene Clark was there. And I met him. And he was super cool. Like took pictures, didn't charge anything. I mean, this is 2008. There's times have changed, but so I find a CD, I get a CD, and when I started doing this channel, I was like, one of the first things I did was I did like I listened to the CD all the way through and just reviewed it as I listened to it. So it kind of became like an inside joke with some people. It was like, keep the love flame burning and stuff. So in October, I went back up to Pittsburgh for Living Dead weekend in Evans City, and he was going to be there. I was like, holy shit, I'm going to get my CD signed. I'm going to talk to him about his music because I guarantee you nobody talks to him about his music. And
Probably not.
it's going to be this, fun experience. I get there. I'm like, I walk up to him and he's he's a professional now at this point. I mean, he's got everything that you could imagine. T-shirts, posters, whatever. So I walk up, I'm like, like, hey, you know, I'm a big fan of your music. And he just looked at me and he was just like, oh, okay, thanks, man. Well, hey, how about I do this for you? And he starts saying, putting this package together. It's like, I'm gonna give you this poster, and you can take a picture with me, and I'll sign this, and I'll sign that, and then I'll tell you what, I'll even throw in this $250. I'm just like,
What?
I was like, I'll think about it, man. I'll be back. And I just never came back. And I was just like, I just wanted to talk to him about his music for a second. Cause I guarantee, I mean, he's probably just like, yeah, whatever. I'm just here to make a buck at this point. But not that he's not a mean guy or anything, but he's just one of
No,
those
he's just like a Virgil.
carnies, you know?
He's like a Virgil kind of character. He's
Yeah.
just trying to get like as much as he can. Yeah.
Yeah. Total
No,
carny.
there's a lot of guys like that. That's why I kind of like backed off on getting people, like meeting people. Because it's just there's a lot of that now. And there's a lot of like, you know, used to be you just walked up to somebody, like you look at that show, speaking of that 2004 show, you look at that show and you just went up to Romero and like you just sat down and you talked to him, you know, while he was signing his stuff, and then somebody took your picture and it was $20, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you could talk to him for
$20.
as long as you wanted to. And he signed 2 things. And you look at that, and now it's like, okay, it's like $40. The cheapest person's like $40 for an autograph. Then you got your photo ops, which are like $80, $50, whatever they are now. You can't take pictures at a table anymore. And if you do take pictures, they charge you for selfies now. Then they charge you for like shit that they have on their table, you know, like they'll charge you 10 extra bucks if you want an 8x10. It's like, it's just
that was the craziest one to me.
ridiculous.
I was just like, I just want to go buy an 8x10, give him $10 and say thanks, and just walk off just to prove a point. But yeah, that's why I'm saying I think you'd really love Living Dead Weekend because it's a completely different type of convention because everybody's there. I mean, it's, you know, it's all the Romero guys, and perfect example, like last year they had John Rice, who is the cop that shoots himself at the beginning of Dawn of the Dead. You know, he worked behind the scenes on Dawn, Night Riders. But it was like his first appearance at a Living Dead Weekend or any convention in the US, I think. But he's just one of those guys. You walk up to his table and he's just like, hey, you guys want to hear a story? We're like, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And he just starts telling you a story about filming Dawn of the Dead, or, you know, you ask him something and he's like looking it up. And he's, you know, he's like, oh, where was that shot? You know, and it's just like, they're just all there to hang out. You know, if you want to buy something cool, but like a lot of those people just like talking about their work, you know, like Tony Buba or Tom Dubinsky or those types, you know.
That used to be really honestly how it was, to a great degree. Like I was talking on another show about this too. Like back in the early 2000s, people still had projects they were promoting. Like a lot of these guys still were like doing movies, and that like they wanted to talk about their movies. They didn't give a shit about talking about, you know, about money and like, you know, trying to get your. They just wanted you. The main purpose of those shows used to be to promote something they were doing.
Yeah.
And like it was secondary was, you know, that you get something signed and something like that. They just wanted to try to get their work out there. But now it's just everything is just that none of those people having work. They just that's their job. They just
that's their career. They're
Yeah.
professional guests now, basically. But yeah, let me catch up on some comments here. A little bit behind, guys. Sorry. I'm way fucking behind. Jesus Christ. Yeah. Mayor saying Sean's just peacocking. Talking about Sean Clark earlier.
Yeah. That's a guy I haven't heard anything about in a while. Is Tony Moran.
Yeah. Well, he was supposed to be there. We have a little convention here in Evansville. It's like the Evans City Horror Con, or not Evans City, Evansville Horror Con. And he was slated to be there last year. And just they just took him off. Like they didn't even announce it. It was like, oh, Tony Moran is canceled. It was just like 1 minute he was there, 1 minute he's not. So I don't know if they just kind of caught wind of like his reputation, and we're just like, nah, never mind, or how that went. But yeah, I'll say that. Since his Sean Clark's site visits very informative, very well connected. Yeah. Yeah, I do like his Horror's Hallowed Grounds stuff.
Yeah.
He does good stuff with that for sure. Grande's agreeing with you on that. Simon Baker was terrible. I know he's not a big fan of that. Yeah, Mayor, no love for Leguizamo and Tu Wong Fu, Uncle.
No, I like Patrick Swayze better.
No love for Johnny Legs and Super Mario Brothers. Come on.
Mario. I love how that movie's got a renaissance now.
It really does. It's got that, what was that, Umbrella put out that big package.
Yeah, it's going for like
It's,
hundreds of dollars now.
I mean, it's beautiful.
Crazy.
Don't get me wrong, but shit, it's the fucking Super Mario Brothers movie. I mean,
Yeah.
there's an idea there, but I don't think they pulled it off quite the way they wanted to. Then saying Ken Foray is in Zone of the Dead. Okay, that's interesting. I didn't know that. Yeah, I'll check that out. John Vulo, what's up, man? Good to see you. John Vulo, he actually he's going to be doing some stuff for Night of the Living Dead. He's working with the Image 10 guys right now with John.
Oh, okay.
So he's in the weeds right now, finding unnamed, unknown zombies and ghouls from Night of the Living Dead at the moment. So like in the background, like he's
Jesus,
doing
that's a project right there.
I gotta get you on soon, John. Go into that because we talked at the Living Dead weekend back in June, and just kind of the process that he had to go through because he found there's a lady named Sharon Carroll, who was one of the ghouls in Night of the Living Dead. Nobody ever discovered. He found her and got her to fly in from Florida to the convention. Very super nice lady, and she was having a ball. She was having a fucking blast. She was just like, I had no idea I was a celebrity. I'm like, well, yeah, there's people that are going crazy to meet you.
I would say there's a lot of people that have no idea that like how big that stuff is.
Yeah,
And
I
like,
wonder that.
Yeah.
Like, she had no idea. She was just like, I met somebody that flew in from the UK to meet me, and I was just like, why? I was like, we're nuts, but welcome to the family, you know.
Yep.
Since saying Naked Lunch is fun, yeah, I definitely highly recommend checking that one out if you can get a hold of it. Larry, what's up, NWGON TV? I know Uncle Bill loves Don. Has he ever visited the mall? Yeah, we covered that. Saw Wes was there in June. Yeah, I did see. So Wes was there on Sunday, and I just that was the day that we were leaving, and I think I was on the second floor, and he was going down the escalator, and I was just like, "Hey, CK," and he just gave me away, but I didn't really get to talk to him or anything. I think he was there with Rob. I think he was there with.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Rob was down there too. That's like my mecca, so I had to go there. Like that was the first place that I think we stopped was the mall.
Yeah, like that first time is it's hard to beat that first time when you're just pulling up and you're just like
that was how I felt. I was like you drive up there and like going up there as I was driving up there anyway. I don't know if anybody else has had this experience, but like you can see it like like how it was in the movie, and then like it's still like set up in a way that like I'm nostalgic enough and seen it as many times as I have that it just hit me like and there's a feeling that comes over you where you're like, holy shit, like I'm there where it was filmed, and like this is amazing.
And start piecing it together in your head.
Yeah,
you're like, oh, that's
you start landmarks and stuff start to make sense. At least on the outside. The inside is pretty much completely different now. But the outside is like you're like, holy shit, like it's like clear as day that that's the mall. So
yeah. Larry actually he does the tour of the mall every year for Living Dead weekend, and he actually takes you back where the engine room and stuff is, and the stairwell, and all that looks pretty much exactly the same.
That I want to do. We didn't do that. I didn't even know that was an option at that time, but that I want to do at some point.
Highly recommend doing it. It's well worth the trip and the money for sure. Yeah, the only Cronenberg, Mayor says, believe the only Cronenberg film I haven't seen is the drag racing film. I haven't seen that either. What is that? That's called like Fast Company, I think. Is that
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I've never seen that one either. Cronenberg doing a drag racing movie in the 70s is kind of an interesting enough concept, but
it is. I wonder if that's like the prequel to Crash.
Yeah.
That movie messed with me for a while. The first time I saw it, by the way.
Yeah. That's a fun one to watch with the family.
Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah, Larry's saying he was at the Horrifying Weekend 2004 too, 20 years ago this month in a few days. First time meeting George and all those major Romero related people. Yeah, I think I remember Larry saying that when I had him on. I kind of sparked. I was just like Horrifying 2004. I think that's where the Dead Pit guys were at.
Yep.
Um,
It was either I'm trying to remember too. It was either 2004 or 2005 that the Day of the Dead people were all there too. And I can't remember. I can't remember if all the Dawn and Day people were there at 2004 or if I'm getting those 2 years mixed up in my head. But the main thing I remember about that is just Pilato and Gary Clark screaming like lines from Day of the Dead back and forth to each other and like cracking people up. Like, they would just stand up and like walk out to the
yeah,
aisle and start like screaming stuff at each other. And that was back when, that shit happened. And they
yeah.
would, people would interact and stuff like that. And it was like a big party kind of
Well,
atmosphere.
that's the thing, kind of with all, still to this day, kind of with all of the Day of the Dead guys, like Pilato and Gary Clark, which I know you guys interviewed Gary Clark, and that's an interesting story if you want to tell
Interview
that one.
Pilato too, yeah.
Yeah,
The g the g I don't know what Gary Clark's deal was. To this day, I'm not sure if he was just a really big talker or if, there was other things going on. I don't know. But that guy talked literally nonstop for 2 hours. Like, we didn't say anything. Like, he just started talking and then never stopped. And he was like, at one point, I think Wes and somewhere was like, he said he tried to interject something. He was like, and Gary Clark was like, I'm just going to give you like everything that I've got. And like, I'll just go through all this stuff and you guys can edit it and figure out what you want to use or whatever. So I'm just going to keep talking. And it's like, okay. And so Wes like went out and got breakfast, came back while he was still talking. I'm just sitting there. He goes out, he gets breakfast. He comes back in, he eats his breakfast and then like puts it up, goes and throws it away, comes back, says, he's still talking, like nothing. There was no questions. He went and used the bathroom too. Like it's like no, it didn't matter. Like it was 2 hours of non-stop, just him talking. There's the unedited interview somewhere. It's probably on the Patreon. I'd say.
yeah, it's on the pack because
Yeah.
I listened to it. I remember listening to the original episode, and he edited it down to 30, maybe 45 minutes. But the actual unedited version's like 2.5 hours long, something like that. And I listened to that whole thing, which for a hardcore Romero fan, I mean, it's pretty cool because it's really him telling his story of not just his career, but his life.
Yeah, it's his life story.
And the fact that he's no longer with us, and we actually have that, to go back and listen to is actually pretty cool. But yeah, in hindsight, it's pretty fucking hilarious that you guys pretty much asked one question and then it was just like
as an interview. I mean, that's not what you want to have. You know what I mean? Like, you don't want to just be sitting there for 2 hours.
Because then you start thinking, like, is this going to go on forever? Am I stuck here? How do I stop? Like,
but I mean, yeah, you are right though. Like, I mean, in terms of like having something historical related to like anybody that wants to go back and hear, his entire life story that's a Romero fan, like it's there. I mean, so yeah.
It was interesting to me, like listening to him talking about his stage work and all the actors and stuff that he'd worked with and stuff like that. But yeah, I could definitely see, because as I was listening to it, I was just like, I kind of forgot that you guys were interviewing him. It just sounded like he was just reading.
We weren't interviewing him technically. He was interviewing himself. Like, yeah.
You guys just got it started and he just took off with it. Let's see. Larry said at Living Dead Weekend, I personally arranged to have a lot of our smaller guests, and I recommend that they charge $20 and a free photo with them. So that's on me. Yeah, Larry does a lot of the tracking down of a lot of the obscure guests and
yeah. I mean, that to me is how it should be.
Yeah,
it really shouldn't have deviated from that the way it has now.
Yeah, it's gotten a little crazy, but it is what it is at this point. I blame Sean Clark.
I mean, it's funny, man, because like we're having a conversation with Sean Clark at Whorehound, and Wes was just being honest, and he was like, I don't think he realized like who he was around, so he's like, man, this shit's getting out of hand, like these people are like, I remember he said like, I remember when people were charging like $20, and like Sean Clark just interrupted him right in the middle. He was like, oh yeah, I remember when gas was 65 cents too, and blah blah fucking blah. It was hilarious because he got mad about it. It's like, it's just, dude, it's true though. Like, I mean, there's really no reason autographs should be $60 and $80. There's just not. Like,
no, I mean, it's just people will pay it though. That's the thing. Yeah. I mean, it's not like conventions are losing popularity. Yeah. I mean, there's more and more of them popping up all the time, and people are just tripping over themselves to go and spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars to meet.
Oh yeah, and that's
you
not
know,
even getting into guys like Robert Englund and stuff like that who are like way up there in terms of
yeah.
price. I'm just talking about people that have been in niche kind of
hmm
horror films are $60 and $80 now.
Since then, Clark was a Kevin Smith fan, nonstop talking. Yeah, it was kind of like that. Yeah, you just kind of wind them up and let them go. Yeah, this is something since bringing up. Sean Clark actually has an old Monroeville Mall tour from like '93. I think. Have you ever seen that?
No,
When he
no.
visited the mall, they rode the elevator in the J.C. Penney's and all that stuff.
That is amazing though.
Yeah, I didn't visit the mall until 2021, like right after COVID. I finally was just like, after COVID, I was just like, fuck all this shit. I'm doing what I want to do. I'm gonna go finally make a trip, But yeah. All right. One other thing I wanted to talk about real quick before we get into Bruiser, which I had a lot more to cover here, but we've just kind of just been kind of going.
I mean, I was sitting here thinking, like, when you were talking about that, how many people from Romero's movies that we've interviewed, and it's quite a few. Now that I think about it.
Well, I mean, that's when you guys first started. You guys have been doing May of the Dead, pretty much since the beginning. So I remember you guys interviewing like Judith O'Day, Tom Savini. You guys interviewed Savini. Was Savini an asshole to you?
No. The funny thing about it is Savini was amazing during that interview. Like, just, setting it up and like how he was behind the scenes and how that interview went was great. It's just in person. I always had a problem with it.
That's the thing. Like, people always talk about, like, I've met Savini a couple times in a convention setting. You go up to his table, try to get him to sign something, and it's just like, he's just like, fuck you. Like, here's your signature. Thanks. Bye. And it's just like, all right. But I bumped into him in the lobby of the hotel one year, Living Dead weekend. He was just walking through and he literally bumped into me. And he was like, oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me. He's like, oh, hey, great shirt. Are you here for the show? I'm like, yes, Tom Savini. And I think this was like my first year there. And I was like, yes, I'm here. And he was like, oh, great. Well, I'll see you there. I'll see you there. I'm like, wow, Tom's actually pretty nice. So then I went to his table and met him. And he was just like, yeah, thanks. Okay, bye.
I don't understand it. It's like a switch. It's like a switch goes off. And like when he's behind that table, it's like he just shuts down. I don't know what it is. But.
Yeah, I don't know. I think maybe he just gets weirded out. People asking him to sign things, and maybe he just thinks they're just going to resell it on eBay anyway.
Yeah,
so
I just think I don't think he's that guy to do shows.
He does a shitload of them though. So
yeah, he does more than pretty much anybody except Kane Hodder. Jeez, you can't gonna keep Kane Hodder from a show.
Okay, if he's not booked, he'll show up.
Yep.
He's like the he's like the anti-Dennis Stamp.
Yeah, he's gonna
show up whether he's booked or not. By God. But one thing I wanted to touch on here before we get into this Bruiser release is you guys actually have a documentary, Into the Pit, which is available on DVD. Which I don't know if you can tell them where they can get that. What was that like? Because when they filmed this, it was like you guys were like maybe a year or so into it. What was it like having? Like, how did that come about? Did somebody just message you and say, "Hey, I want to do a documentary on you guys"? Basically,
so there was so at pretty much probably the height of the popularity of the show, right?
Mm-hmm.
There was a guy who did documentaries. He was kind of like an aspiring filmmaker named Kelly Marcotte, and he had a friend. They're from Wisconsin. He had a friend. His name was Jim, and he was a big horror fan. And I think he knew about us, and he was a big guy in the convention scene and things like that. He went to a lot of shows, and that was like more of his thing than it was Kelly's thing.
Okay.
And so that's really, I think that's how Kelly came to find out who we were or anything about us. I believe that's
so. He wasn't even a fan, really. He was
I don't think Kelly was. I mean, it's hard for me to imagine that Kelly gave a shit about like anything like that. It just wasn't his like thing.
Okay,
our show would not have been his thing. I think Jim was the one that kind of turned him on to, but I don't know. I could be wrong about that. Like, I don't know exactly how Kelly came to find out about our show. I just remember he did, and then like he contacted us, and we were doing one of his films we reviewed too, and I can't remember the name of it now, but like it was like a short film. And so I remember this phone conversation too, where he was like, I want to do a documentary about the show. And the very first thing that went through my head, I don't know if I've said it or not, but I definitely thought it was like this is not a good idea. Like, this is like there's not enough stuff, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's a radio show, number one. Like, there's not, it's not a
Well,
riveting
I
kind
kind of
of.
feel like he thought maybe that you guys, because the way that it's portrayed, I know you guys have joked about this before in the past, but like the opening of that, where it's like you walking through the woods and down the creek and all this shit, I thought maybe he thought that you guys were just like in a cabin on a hill somewhere in eastern Kentucky,
I think he
and
did, yeah.
he's like, oh, there's these people out in the middle of nowhere doing this stuff, and you get there, I don't know. What did you think of the final product though when you first saw it? Because me personally, I do enjoy it. I think it's
I
actually
didn't
pretty interesting.
I didn't
But I
mind it.
enjoy stuff like that though. I love
Yeah.
those type of documentaries though. So
I mean, we did a screening. I forget at what show it was, at what convention it was. But we did a screening of it for, a lot of people that just enjoyed the show and things like that, and were mainly the people that were there. And I remember watching it there, and I don't mind that documentary. CK is the one that's got the biggest problem with it. He
oh
just
really?
because I think I couldn't. I'm not going to speak for him or anything, but I do remember, like, at the time that we did that documentary, his whole plan for that was that it would be a promotional piece for the show.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think he really wanted more shit that had to do with, like, goofy shit and us doing the show and, like, things like that, that would kinda tie in so people would, like, listen to the show. That was the whole because I remember talking to him about it, and I'm like, we were both like, "Dude, this is not a good idea." We both knew it wasn't a good idea, but he was like, "But fuck it, like, he wants to do it, like, let's use it to, like, promote the show," and that's kinda like the angle that we were taking with it.
Mm.
So, it's somewhere in the middle of that, and there's a dispute, about, like, what exactly happened. If you ask me versus if you ask Kelly versus if you ask, like, CK, you'll get 3 different answers about how exactly that turned around and everything. So I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to get into all that crap, but, like, it turned into something else completely than that. I'll say that.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I've when I saw it, because I think I first saw it was on YouTube for free. Um, so I don't know. First time I saw it, I enjoyed it because I love shit like that, like just real, documentary type stuff. And yeah, I mean, you can tell it's like low budget or whatnot, but I just thought it was fascinating. But yeah, if you guys want to check this out, Into the Pit, aka Uncle Bill Goes to College, check it out.
Listen, it is a great time capsule though of that
It
period of
is,
time
yeah.
in terms of shows and, like, like horse celebrities and stuff like that. It's a really cool, like, moment in time of
Because I
that
think
period.
like the main thing, the main thing of that whole documentary was you guys getting John Carpenter and George Romero
Yeah,
on the show.
yeah.
So
That was all going on around the same time as that. Like, we were promoting the Carpenter interview and all that while that was, like, yeah, that was the big thing. Yeah.
Ben Grimm's in the house. What's up, man? I loved when Savini went on Letterman to show off all his special effects back in the day. Yeah, he used to do that quite a bit in the 80s. He was kind
Yeah,
of
he was on there a lot.
yeah, Savini was a big name back then. Yeah, Dennis Stamp, that's a deep cut. Yeah. Love me some Beyond the Mat. Uh, but yeah. So all right, let's get into Bruiser here. We're about an hour and 40 in. We haven't even got to the main event yet. So let's talk a little Bruiser. Indicator,
Yeah.
4K from the UK. Um,
Did
what
you, like, actually, this is the only I'm gonna tell you the truth. This is maybe one of the only, if not the only, books inside of one of these that I've read.
you
So
have?
it comes
I haven't read it yet.
yeah, it comes with, like, it's basically an interview book, but yeah, there's several different interviews in there
Yeah,
and a couple of essays.
that's the one thing I haven't done yet. I have not read anything in this book yet, and I need to, because Bruiser is just one of those movies that's just kind of got lost to time. Like not a lot of people talked about it, and I think it's, in my opinion, I feel like George was a big believer in it. When it was made, when it came out, I feel like George really loved what he had done but nobody responded to it. Like nobody
No.
gave a shit. Like, and I feel like it almost, in a way, kind of maybe broke George's spirit to the point where he was just like, well, I guess they only care if I make zombie movies at this point. So that's all I can do. That's all I'll do, you know?
Looking at the timeline of this too, I kind of feel like it was really bad timing for something that personal to him to bomb because like so that Bruiser's 2000, right? The next big thing that happens is the Snyder Dawn of the
Mm.
Dead remake. So it's like he probably saw, okay, well, there's this huge, you know, resurgence of this now. So like I probably should, you know, that's the thing people want. That's the thing I should do or whatever.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, I haven't. But this is like in his top three. I think he said like you know Martin, Night Riders, and this are like you know
I
his most
definitely
personal film.
I definitely think then that's one of the reasons why I'm such a fan of this movie and have been since the first time I saw it. And I think the older I get, the more I understand it, the
Yep,
more that I do like it. Um, and to me, it is George's most personal film. Was the most personal film that he had made, where he actually had something to say, something that he wanted to get out, probably since Night Riders.
yep.
Like maybe
Well,
Day of the Dead to an extent, but in terms of just like a personal, like getting things out, getting things off of his chest, like especially when you think in hindsight, like maybe at the time you didn't realize it, but in hindsight, looking back, I mean, he would go through his divorce with Christine Romero a couple of
yep,
years after this, and he'd move to Canada and just kind of just you know just kind of say fuck the because you got to think before Bruiser, you know, 6 7 years he spent trying to get something made in Hollywood, and it just you know Resident Evil, the
no,
Mummy, one thing after another just never happened. It was just like everybody just kept pulling the rug out from under him and just one thing after another. And then finally he was just like, fuck it, I'm moving to Canada.
yep.
Like,
This is his first movie out of the states. This is his first movie.
yeah.
Yeah, that was like based in Toronto. Yeah,
And he's like, I'm gonna get a few bucks together and make this little movie, a personal movie to me. And I think I've heard Felsher say that it's definitely George's angriest film. And I really I think that because like I said, I just rewatched it again last night and just watching it, I'm just like, you can really see like George's to me, it feels like George's midlife crisis movie. Where
yeah.
he's like, I've
I
been
can see
spending
that.
all this time trying to build this house and you know, have a nice car and you know, try to maintain success and status and all this and at the end of the day, for fucking what? Like, what for? Like, so I feel like that's where George was in his life at the time. And yeah, I feel like it really comes out in Bruiser. So when the first time you saw Bruiser, what was
Mm.
your initial thoughts first time you saw it?
Man, well, the first time I saw Bruiser, I was in my 20s.
Mhm.
Because it was, like, during the first run of the show and everything, and CK and I used to make fun of it, like, incessantly about how bad it was. I just hated it. I just didn't get it. You really shouldn't watch this movie in your 20s, to be honest, because 'cause you're really not gonna get, like, a lot of the subtext and things that are going on in this movie. Like, this is a movie to watch, like, after you've got some life experience, some shit's happened to you, like, you kinda you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
everything's not, like, all, you know, roses and rainbows and shit. That's the time period to watch this movie because you get more kind of context about what was going on, you know, in the film itself. So yeah,
Mhm.
when I first watched it, it was for the show. I do remember that. Like, it was that crappy DVD. And by the way, that's the only context I have for how good this looks versus something else. Is that
Yeah,
DVD.
it's like
So
miles away, yeah.
yeah, so when I saw this, I was like, Jesus, like this is amazing. Like compared to that, like comparatively speaking, this is 1,000 times better. So, but yeah, I hated it the first time I saw it. Didn't get it. Didn't understand it. Wasn't anything like anything else that I'd ever seen Romero do. Joked about it for years, and then went back and watched it again when we did that show with Felsher, where we reviewed like kind of forgotten Romero films, and it was The Dark Half, I think, and
Mhm.
Bruiser. And I was like, this movie's fucking great. It's the horror version of Falling Down. That's what I said. And I think that that's
Yeah.
how I kind of like look at it.
Mhm.
Like that's what it reminds me of. Is like the Michael Douglas Falling Down movie, but if it was set like in a horror kind of fantasy land.
Yeah.
And I just loved it. Like the last time that I watched it. And so I was like super excited for this to come out because I had to watch it on like crappy DVD quality last time.
And that DVD looks like shit.
It
Like
does, yeah.
it's not good.
And so this time when I watched it, I was like, the picture was 1,000 times better for one thing, which added the enjoyment. But I was like, yes, this is a good movie. Like this is a good low budget, personal, like you said, kind of movie that explores like what happens when you get, frustrated. Everybody is like turning their backs on you. You kind
Mhm.
of you lose yourself in the middle of all that and like become somebody that you don't want to become. And it's a great kind of rumination on all those things.
Yeah, and just watching it again, it's like you realize like literally everybody in that character, Henry Creedlow, everybody in his life is fucking with him at all times. Even to the
Yeah.
point where him and his buddy are playing tennis and his buddy lies about whether or not the ball landed out of bounds or not. And he's just like,
Yep.
"Oh, yep, that was out." And it's like it wasn't, obviously. Um, but
Well,
yeah,
I love the scene too where like it's like everything too. And that's purposeful too. If you like listen to the Romero commentary, like everything in that movie is set up to fuck with him. So like there's
mhm,
a scene where he's trying to get into the train and the woman like kind of knocks in front of him. And then he
mhm.
has the fantasy about throwing her on the tracks and everything. So it's like in every aspect of his life, like somebody is trying to like mess with him.
Yeah, from
Yeah.
his wife, boss. I mean, it's
Yeah.
and you can think like Romero, that's how Romero felt at the time. Because it's like working, trying to get all his projects made in the 90s that just never happened. I'm sure he felt like just people were fucking with him. It's like, because the mummy got a green light. It was like, all right, we're making this
Yeah.
movie. And then yank, right? Just like, nope, psych, we're not making that. Oh,
Yeah.
Resident Evil, you're gonna do Resident Evil, perfect. All right, nope, we're not doing that. So I mean, like I said, it feels very to the point where I don't know if you recognize the voice or not, but George actually plays the voice that calls into the radio show, the guy that shoots himself at the beginning.
I thought that was what it was. I was also going to ask you something else too,
Well,
because like this guy's not credited, but I swear to you, man, like, and I'm not even positive. I guess he would have still been alive at that time. I'm pretty sure. I think the guy that's the radio DJ in the first part of that,
mhm,
when they first, at the beginning of the movie, when he's
mhm.
listening to it and he's getting ready and all that stuff, is that Richard France? Because if it's not, it sounds exactly like Richard France.
I'll have to go back and listen to that. I'm not sure.
That just like I was watching it again today and I was like, that voice, man, that's a difficult voice to miss.
Hmm.
So I don't know. Like I could be wrong about that, but if not, they got somebody that sounded like a ton like him. Anyway, I picked up on that too with the Romero stuff as well. Yeah.
Again, I never realized that until I think it was when I watched that Studio Canal Blu-ray. I never picked up on that that was George's voice until I watched it. And I was just like, because he kind of disguises it. He kind of puts on an accent. He
Yeah.
kind of does his own thing. But like, listen to it. I was just like, that sounds like George. I'm pretty sure that's George. And then it's like, yeah, that's George. You can pick up on it. But it's kind of like, in a way, like a really good voice performance from George because it's so you wouldn't picture George saying that or being that
No.
guy. Um, but yeah, I picked up on that here recently. I was just like, holy shit, that's George on that. But it really shows like George doing that voice and doing that performance and saying and doing the shooting himself on the radio
Yep.
show or whatever. Like you can tell like George was kind of feeling that at the time where especially what the guy was saying, and it's like you work your whole life and nobody gives a shit, and it's like
Yep.
you're like, wow, okay. But
I
yeah, I
mean,
remember.
to me, the whole underlying theme of this movie is frustration.
Mhm,
And I feel like that's probably you're probably right. That's where he was at in his life at that point. Like just like you said, all those projects falling through, like where he was, losing all that time at that point where he should have been making like that should have been his prime time right there
mhm.
was during that period. And he just completely got shut out of that by studio bullshit, really. Like was the majority of the reason why all that happened. And
Yeah.
so I'm sure that like that was just anger and frustration that, like kind of funneled into that movie. That
Oh,
was the whole kind of thing.
absolutely. Like I don't know, like I don't know. I think about like his relationship with his wife Christine at the time, and I know that they ended up getting divorced and all that.
Yeah.
Um, but
That was
like
that was
I
around the time of Land of the Dead, wasn't it too? Like
yeah, it was
when
right
they
around that time. Yeah,
'cause he met his third wife, I think, on that movie.
yeah, it was right
Yeah.
around that same time up there in Canada. But like you can see, like I know when I first saw Bruiser when it first came out, like I was 13 maybe when I first saw it, and it was the first like new Romero movie that I had seen because I had just kind of discovered George in the late 90s, you know, what Dawn of the Dead, Night of the Living Dead, stuff like that. So then it was like, oh my god, a new George movie, like I gotta check this out, like this is going to be gory and awesome. And
Yeah.
it just wasn't like it was.
No.
I thought it was like a because you look at the poster and the artwork, it kind of you think like, oh, this is gonna be a slasher or something. And you're like, but it's not. It's not at all. Like it is in a weird way, kind of George's weird take
On
on kind of
slashers?
the on a
Yeah.
guy in a mask going around killing people. In a weird white collar, sophisticated way. I don't know how to put it, but
It might
um,
be you're right, it might be as close as he ever got to doing a slasher, really.
pretty
Like,
much, yeah.
because, I mean, it is like, once you get past all the psychological aspects of it, like, it's just a guy going around killing everybody that's wronged him, really,
Pretty
like
much, yeah. He's um so yeah, the first time I saw it, like I liked it because I was like, oh, it's George. It's and it's a guy that the mask thing kind of looks cool. And I was a huge fan of the Misfits at the time, and the Misfits is in this movie. Like, this is fucking
yeah.
awesome. Like, what a cool, party scene or whatever. But I never really like you said, I never really got it until I watched it again later in life, and especially now, like going back and watching it and really kind of getting it now, especially looking back at where George was in his career and his life at the time, and kind of looking at my own life in a lot of ways, and just saying like, I'm kind of in the same spots. I have the same. Everybody's been at work. Everybody's been at work someday where you're dealing with some bullshit, and in the back of your mind, it's like, why am I wasting the time that I have on this earth doing this bullshit?
Yeah.
Everybody's been there.
Yeah, you had that
Um,
thought, that existential kind of thought of like, "What the fuck is the point of any of this?" Like,
exactly.
and yeah, and it's almost felt like too that he was trying to jam in as many relatable things as he could into this one movie. Like, so
Yeah.
you got like everything that could go wrong with this guy goes wrong. So you got the partner is cheating with his boss.
Hmm.
You've got his best friend is ripping him off, like, stealing the money from his accounts and things like that. Like anything you can think of.
The
His boss
dog
is
hates him.
the dog hates his boss is like the biggest dickhead that just like embarrasses him in front of like all of his coworkers and things like that. Any area of your life that you can think of, like he has a problem and there's somebody like coming after him. So it's kind of like, yeah, it's all relatable in some way or another.
Yeah, and it's the fantasy aspect too of like, what if one day, which here's the question, and this has kind of been debated. I don't know if it's ever been answered by George, because I mean, this is one of those movies that when it came out, it just kind of flopped and nobody really talked about it. So George really never talked about it too much. Um, but what is your take on the mask thing? Was it really there? Was it just in his head?
I can tell you from listening to that commentary, and I didn't know this until recently, that in Romero's mind, this was all a dream.
Okay.
This whole thing that was the way he envisioned it,
Mm-hmm.
was that this was just a fantasy. The whole thing
Mm-hmm.
was kind of made up. So from that, if you look at that movie from that perspective, it completely changes it, because I
Yeah.
really wasn't looking at it from that perspective. Uh, you know, in my mind, it was just a really like cool way to kind of visualize what happens when you lose your identity.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's the white kind of
Just the
blank.
yeah.
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 And
I was keeping that in mind while I was watching it last night. I was like, okay, well, are there any hole or anything that would give it away that would make people? And it's funny because nobody in that movie really, really points out like, oh, you have a white thing on your face.
Yeah, exactly. They're
It's
all like,
always
they all say something like, "What's happened to you?" or something like that, or
yeah.
what's wrong with you?" or something. They don't say like, "Holy shit, you've got a white fucking," like, yeah,
The
plaster
only
over your face.
the only thing that they I think the Leslie Hope character at one point when he confronts her at her house, she says like, "That's not one of my uh masks or whatever." But at the same time, he also still had his own mask and he designed it or
Yeah,
whatever. So she
yeah,
said, "That's not one of my designs or whatever." He's like, "No, it's all me. I've been working on my image." So, and of course, you see in the police station um, when Tom Atkins was playing a detective, go figure, in this movie. When they show the video footage and he's got the mask, he's like, "Oh, that's that dame. She makes those." Um, he still has that mask, so maybe he is going around with the actual mask, doing these things. It's not actually on his face; it's just in his head. I don't know.
yeah.
I just thought it was interesting going back and kind of watching and saying like, yeah, nobody ever really points out like, oh, your face is fucked up. It's just like,
You keep and at least I did. I kept waiting for it to be pointed out too.
yeah,
Like, and the fact that it never was kinda like, okay, so this is like a fantasy. Like, he's like,
hmm
he really doesn't have this thing on, but in his mind he does. Like, in his mind, he's lost like all of his features. He's
yeah.
lost his whole kind of like soul and identity and all that.
And it just kind of
So
frees him to do like if you wake up and you're unidentifiable,
yes,
facially,
yeah,
it you're kind of free to do whatever you want at that point.
yeah.
Um, but speaking of the cast, I mean, we talked about Tom Atkins. You mentioned Peter Stormare's character. How do you feel about the performances,
Yeah.
and
I was gonna
especially the
ask
Peter
you
Stormare? Go
I was
ahead.
gonna ask you the same thing because 'cause I'm on the fence with that fucking performance quite a bit. Because 'Cause I'm like, on the one hand, I think there's certain parts of it that are good. I think he goes way too over the top though sometimes. Like, I just think it's too much. Like, that was my experience with it. I was just kinda like, it's just kinda unbelievable how, in some
Yeah,
places, how over the top it is.
I love that performance personally. Like Stormare, I mean, from his performance and what he does in Fargo, it's like the
Oh,
complete
yeah.
180. It's a complete 180. It's like I'm going way over the top. I'm showing my dick and my balls. Like I'm
He
going crazy.
Yep.
If you got
And
the pair of maracas, get your ass over here and start shaking.
yeah, he, as you could imagine too, he like ad-libbed a ton of that shit.
Oh yeah.
Just like coming like onto the set and just doing whatever. It looks
Mhm.
like to me he's like on cocaine. Like it just
Yeah.
that's the energy that that performance has. Like he's just like,
Which his character at one point he's sitting on the shitter doing
yeah,
cocaine. So
yeah,
it's like
exactly.
it fits. I will say it is a little over the top at times, but I don't know if you watched the interview with Jason Fleming on the
I did,
okay.
yeah,
I thought it was really interesting hearing him talk about the way George directed the actors and the performances, where
yeah,
George was kind of just like, "Hey, you guys are doing great. Like, I just love what you guys are doing." Like, he's very George. The way George directed actors is very different than like a Kubrick or somebody like that. Like George was very open to be like, "Okay, that's good. Let's do that."
oh yeah,
Now, I think that there's some criticism there to be had in the way that George would kind of let guys like Stormare or even like a Dennis Hopper or somebody kind of take it a little too over the top, take it a little too far. But I think George was
yeah,
just kind of always open for that. Even going back to like, Day of the Dead and stuff like, Pilato, really, really over the top.
yeah.
Um, so I think you could have pulled back maybe a little bit on Stormare's performance, but I think George was just he just loves watching actors act, and I think that's maybe like one. It's kind of like Argento. A lot of the criticism that Argento gets is that he's not as interested in his actors as he is the look of his films. Um,
Yeah, I definitely get that with Argento. I don't get that as much with Romero though. I
Yeah,
mean,
not as much, but I think Romero's more interested in the theme and making sure that the thematics of what he's trying to get across are all in place more so than whether he's not making Shelley Duvall do 100 takes. You know what I mean?
yeah,
That type of
no, he's not like doing any kind of Kubrick shit or anything like that. But yeah, um, that performance, I know for a fact that Romero loved Stormare in that performance. Like he loved what
hmm
he was doing. But for me, it's like I really got like a Tommy Wiseau kind of vibe from that performance. I was just like, it's just there's something about it that's just like so with that accent and everything, and like
Yeah,
just so over the top. Just kind of, but I mean, it didn't detract from my enjoyment of the movie. I'll say that. It was just kind of noticeably like I got what he was trying to do. I understood that it was, like in the overall character arc of that person, like he needs to
Yeah.
be like that. But for me, it just I don't know, it hit me in a weird way. Like I kind of like parts of it, and the other parts I was like, I can't.
Yeah, there's to me that character's just super quotable in a lot of ways. Like I
Yeah,
use
he's got some great stuff, like great
like
lines. Yeah,
like he's coming out of the handicap porta potty and he's like oh what do you got a woman in there, and he's like what do you think I'm doing, taking the shit of a lifetime in here? Like I think I use that all the time. It's like, what do you think I'm doing, taking a shit of a lifetime here? What was fuck, what's the other one that I always think about? But he's got a ton of like just great lines. There's a lot of that ad libbed.
Oh yeah,
When he's downstairs talking to Tom Atkins after Nina Garbera's is thrown out the window, and he's
yeah,
just like, "Was there anybody else up there?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, I always invite an audience, cheerleaders, Cracker Jacks."
yeah. There's a
Uh,
part too that cracked me up too, where like he's like on the phone with 911 or whatever, and he's like, "I can't take her fucking Polish. She's 20 feet off up there."
or when he's trying to describe, he's like, "Ask anybody. They were all here. They saw what happened. Ask him. Ask the saxophone guy. Fuck, he's blind. Oh no."
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like, no, it's definitely over the top, but I just get a kick out of, especially after coming from like Fargo, where he's
Oh
just
yeah,
this
he's
quiet,
completely mute basically in
yeah,
that movie. Yeah.
yeah, just a completely different type of psychopath. Um, but what about the rest of the cast? Jason Fleming, what do you think? That's
Jason
a
Fleming, I thought, did a really good job. I
Yeah.
mean, there's a solid performance from like he never really like goes overboard playing like, a hurt kind
Mhm.
of character or anything like that. There's only one scene where he really even like kind of externalizes that, and that's the scene where he's sitting in the chair and he's like, I don't know what to do. And
Yeah.
he's kind of like shaking and stuff like that. But other
Mhm.
than that, he stays pretty much like, he kind of goes through it
Which kind
and
of plays into the fantasy aspect of it, where he's
it
just
it does, yeah.
he's kind of just the Charles Bronson revenge character. He's just, I'm going after all these fucking people, and he's smoking the cigar and
Yep.
throwing the papers at the um
But I tell you, like, I love the one I don't know her name. I probably should know her name, but I don't. The main chick who designs the masks and everything.
Leslie
Um,
Hope.
Leslie Hope. I
Yep.
thought her performance was great.
Yeah.
Tom Atkins, I was like, when I was watching the Tom Atkins performance, I was like, this is basically like his role in Night of the Creeps, but without anything fun like going on, without him like having any one-liners or anything like that. So
Well,
it's
he
kind
does
of like,
have that one line where the police they're upstairs. He's like, "Hey, look what we found." And he drops the skirt and he's like, "Yeah, yeah, great. See if you can fuck up the crime scene anymore." You
yeah, he does have
fucking
that.
judge.
Yeah, you're right.
That's a good line. But yeah, Tom Atkins is pretty much playing the Tom Atkins role in this one, which he plays a detective in Two Evil Eyes
Yeah.
too. So
Well,
it's
he
like,
said there's like a famous thing that Romero said where like Tom Atkins said, like, Jesus Christ, George, could you cast me as something besides a cop for once? Like,
that's true.
uh,
Yeah. Um, but yeah, Atkins is Atkins in it. Nina Garbera's, who plays Janine, the wife of Jason Fleming's character Henry
yeah,
Creedlow. I think she does
she's
a really good job at times. And boy, what a rack!
Jesus Christ, dude. Yeah, like there's that scene where she's coming out, like getting ready and stuff, and she's like in
Yeah,
the like, okay, yeah, like where this
yeah.
is going. But yeah, I mean, she does great. Like both the female leads in the movie do great.
Hmm. Yeah, I've always thought the acting was pretty good. Um, no real weak links anywhere. Of course, it's got some cameos from Christine Romero. She pops
Yeah,
up. She got the
Tina
birdcage.
Romero's
Actually,
in there too.
Tina Romero's in
Yeah.
it. We talked about her earlier. The guys. Have you ever seen Iron City Ass Kickers?
No, I've always wanted to see that though. That's the wrestling thing that he
Yes,
did, isn't
that
it? Yeah.
is right before Bruiser. He did this small little movie in Pittsburgh called Iron City Ass Kickers, and it's basically what you would get if George Romero directed a Vince Russo storyline.
Oh shit.
It's
Yeah.
pretty fucking out there. I recommend checking it if you can get a copy or find it anywhere.
Yeah, I would love to
Um,
see that. Yeah.
but the guys that are in it, I don't know, the guy that's playing with the Misfits at the end. that jumps off the stage and it's basically turns into a wrestling match for some random reason. But those are actually the guys in it that were actually real wrestlers at the time.
That makes perfect sense now. Yeah.
Yeah, but the guy that was playing in the band that jumps off the stage and is getting his ass kicked was actually George's assistant back in the day, Jason. And he was close friends with George for many years. But yeah, a lot of came in. Donald Rubenstein returns to do the score. Of course, Rubenstein from Martin and Night Riders. What did you think of the score as a whole?
Not my favorite.
Yeah.
There's several movies I've watched that have scores very similar to that. And I watched one recently and I can't think of what it was. It might have been Night School, where it's just like jazz kind of runs that play like interspliced in between things going on. And I guess it's to create a sense of like unease and kind of, things being disconnected and things like that. But I don't like shit like that. I like there to be a cohesive kind of like score that makes sense. And in this, you're just like watching a scene, and then all of a sudden it'll be and then that'll end and like go into the next scene. So it's just not my thing. I'm sure like some people.
Well, I don't know if you've ever heard Rubenstein's original, because he was originally, George reached out to him because of course he did Martin, reached out to him to do the score for Dawn of the Dead originally. And so he composed a few tracks that he was, going to use in Dawn of the Dead. I don't know if you ever heard that he actually put out a CD called Reimagined, or Dawn Reimagined, I think, or Dawn Imagined, maybe. Yeah, it's not great. It's not. It's pretty much what you just. It's very.
I can't imagine. I can't imagine that in like Dawn of the Dead. You know what I mean? Like that would be.
It's hard to imagine. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm kind of with you there. Like there are parts of the score that I do like in more the softer, subtle scenes where it's just kind of piano or something playing in the background. But I do think in some of the other scenes, one thing I did notice, and I mentioned this earlier, in this version, the UK 4K, there in certain scenes there is a completely different soundtrack.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you about. There's two things I wanted to ask you about, like to see like what your take was, and that was one of them. So, do you have any idea why that is? Because I don't.
I just realized that last night watching it, and I was just like, did they do this on? Because I know the scene where Henry Creedlow is stalking. I can't remember his name. His best friend who's playing tennis. He's stalking him in the locker room or whatever.
Yeah.
Completely different. So the score that they use in this version, which I'll have to go back and look and see which one they use on the actual DVD from 2000, is completely different than the one that's on the 4K. And it's more of like a jazzy, it's very Donald Rubenstein-ish, whereas the one that they have on this one is more, it almost sounds, I don't know if you watched the bonus feature that they did with Dr. Chud from Misfits.
That's the only one I didn't watch, I think. Yeah.
Well, he actually talks about he actually composed some music that George wanted to use in the movie, and they actually have a sample of it on one of the bonus features on here. I think they used it in that interview too. But it sounds a lot like the music that they use in that scene in this version sounds a lot like the Lost Dr. Chud theme or whatever. So I wonder if they use some of that music to put in it to kind of enhance it better. It does come across that scene especially comes across a whole lot better than it did on that Studio Canal release. So I don't know. Yeah. But I just noticed that last night.
Well, I was going to ask you about something else too that caught my attention too. So I'm listening to the audio commentary on this, and it's George. And in several different places during the audio commentary, the audio drops out completely when he says certain things. And I'm like, why? Is that something that's always been the case? Is that something that happened with this release? Like, sometimes it's when he cusses, I think, and sometimes it's when he mentions like certain people, but it's very weird. It's like it just cuts out completely, like, and then you don't know what exactly he said, and then it comes back in later. He's like dead in the middle of like talking about some part of the movie, and he'll say something, and then it'll just drop. You can notice the audio drop out.
I don't know.
And
I'll have
like,
to go back and listen because I know that the commentary that they use on this one is the same commentary from the DVD from back in the day.
so I was
Um,
curious, yeah, if that's always been the case, if that was just something they just ported over, and that was the way they did it back when they did the DVD, or for some reason, like they just did it for this, they censored certain parts of this for this release.
I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if they did that, but I don't know. I'll have to go back and check on that because I'm not too sure. I haven't listened to the commentary on this version yet because I remember listening to it on the DVD. But now
Yeah,
that you say that, I'm gonna have to go back and listen to it. Um, yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if they did that, especially if they're going in and actually changing music cues and stuff in the actual movie too. So I don't think I'd be shocked if they did that for sure.
yeah.
Um,
I've never listened to a commentary where that happened, so I have no context for like what the hell was going on.
No, I don't. I started watching the commentary earlier, and I got maybe 20, 25 minutes in, and then I got sidetracked for something else. But yeah, I'll have to go back and listen to that and keep that in mind while I'm listening. Um,
It's just bizarre, man. Like it really is.
what the fuck was I gonna say? I was gonna say something else.
You want to talk
Oh,
about the multiple endings of the film? Like it
yeah,
actually has two endings, really.
yeah. Well, what do you make of the ending? Um,
The
because
ending
I
is
know some people they just don't like that ending, and I can
I
see.
love the ending.
Okay, go.
I look, I'm gonna be honest with you. When I saw that ending, I was like, that's awesome. Because like it fits with the character, like, and what like I guess Romero was trying to do at that point.
Hmm.
And the fact, but I was trying to figure out because it makes a lot more sense if you look at it from a fantasy kind of aspect as to why the mask would be back on and all that. Like
Yeah,
when he turns around, because it's kind of like he's switching back into killer mode.
into fuck it
So
mode.
that
Yeah,
yeah, so that's like that's back on now.
yeah.
But the part of it that doesn't make sense to me about it is that the whole point of that mask was to be that, you know, all these people had taken away his identity,
Hmm.
by putting him down so much. So that part didn't make sense because like why would it be back like none of that had happened in that case.
Yeah, I don't know. I the performance I was watching it last night. The guy playing the asshole boss at that end, I was just like, this guy's actually
Yeah.
kind of good. Like he was kind
Yeah.
of going. Who did he remind? He reminded me of like Bob Hoskins or somebody like that.
He's
Just
very much
going
like
just
that. Yeah.
going to really over the top. But the only thing that I never understood about that
The
ending was just
shirt.
that.
You didn't like his
Well,
shirt.
that
That's a
shirt
that's a
was just
loud fucking shirt.
was the music, the ending music, the
Oh
punk
yeah.
rock "Take on
Yeah.
Me" part. I was just like, "Well, that's kinda not fitting to the rest of the movie," but I don't know, I've never had an issue with the ending. I mean, it's just I think it's just a way to end the movie, basically. I don't think it's great or anything, but I just think
Yeah.
it's kind of pushing the point home where he's basically saying, "I'm done with corporate America. I'm fine being the mail boy because at least I
Yep.
have my dignity and freedom, and I don't have to listen to this fucking asshole screaming
Yep.
at me, telling me I'm an asshole all the time." Um, I will say probably my biggest complaint, the lack of gore was one thing that like took me back when I first saw it when I was younger because I was like George Romero, like there's going to be some good gore. It's like it's fairly
Nah.
not too gory at all. And I feel like they missed their opportunity when they killed the Milo Styles character and they have him up there and they hit him with that
Yep.
laser. I'm like, if his head would have exploded all
That would
over
have
that
been amazing.
crowd, that'd
See,
have
that
been
that to me
the
is the
grand
first
finale, you know?
that's the first ending of the movie, right? Because like that's when he loses the mask
Uh
and
huh.
everything after he kills him. So I'm like watching it and I'm like, this is kind of fucking I mean, to me that death sequence and everything's kind of lame
Yeah.
for exactly that reason. Like because like it just looks it's not satisfying enough considering how much shit that guy's put him through.
Mm
The
hmm.
whole film is based around all the shit that guy's put him through, really.
Yeah.
And like then at the end, he's just getting zapped by this kind of fake, FX current looking thing
Yeah.
So I wasn't thrilled necessarily with that ending.
Yeah.
That part of the ending, yeah.
It's a little unsatisfying, but They do shoot him in the dick. So I mean, I guess
Yeah, they shot
that's
him in
one
the
thing
dick.
you can say. They
That's
shot him in
true.
the dick. So
He
it's
needed to be
hard.
shot in the dick. Yeah.
Um,
The other part of the ending, the main ending that I didn't like was, I mean, I get it that he's supposed to be like a completely different guy. He went from a suit to like just a regular guy, but they had to give him like the fucking like he looks like a hippie ponytail and like shirt. He looks like he came right
Hey,
off the beach, like into
well,
the
think about it. A couple of years after this movie was made, George had the ponytail and was just back
yeah,
to,
that's
I
true.
mean, that was George. I mean, like I said, I really
That's
feel like
true.
this was George saying, "I'm done with Hollywood. I'm done with studios. Like, fuck it. I'll be over here. I'll make this little movie in Toronto."
Yeah,
Um,
I would have never put that together, but you're exactly right. Like that was just him kind of projecting
hmm
onto that character. Yeah, at
and
the end
and
there.
and George's always talked about he made the most money he ever made in his entire career in the '90s when he was just writing screenplay after screenplay. Nothing was ever getting made, and nothing was ever happening. But these
Yeah.
studios were, and he was making all this money and all this stuff, but he was just wasn't satisfying to him. And eventually, he just said, "Fuck it, I'm
Do
out."
you about that time period too, though? Do you think, even though he kept himself, afloat and he made good money, do you think that ultimately like hurt his career, like his legacy?
Uh, I mean, sure. I mean, I don't know if it hurt his legacy as much as it just I don't know, it's hard to say. To me, that period feels I feel like there's 3 different periods of Romero's career. There was the first half, which was like Night through the Crazies, where he was
Yeah, yeah,
after Night of the Living Dead, he was struggling, couldn't nothing was a hit, and he was in debt and all this stuff. And so then there was those few years there where he just kind of recoiled, made some sports docs, met up with Rubenstein. Rubenstein kind of, revitalized his career in a way. And then we got Martin through Day, and then we had, George, doing monkey shines and kind of fiddling in the Hollywood system a little bit.
yeah,
But then like the third wave was like there was that period, and then George kind of had his resurgence in the 2000s, Bruiser, but then more importantly, Land of the Dead and all that. So I don't know. To me, it just kind of I feel like it solidifies his legacy to me even more that he didn't do anything in the '90s and still came back to make movies because that's all he wanted to do, and nothing was going to stop him from fucking making movies. Whereas you see a lot of filmmakers now. I mean, how many filmmakers do you know that come out, their first couple of movies, and you're like, wow, this guy's got a lot of talent. This guy's going to be big one day, and then the studios get a hold of him, and you never hear from him again. I could name
yeah,
tons.
yeah. There's a
Um,
lot.
yeah, and but George just never quit. Like he was just so to me, that's one of the reasons why I love Romero as much as I do, is because it's just kind of like against all odds, fuck it, I'm gonna make my movie. Like
Yeah, I just
So
wonder if like Romero could have been looked at like. I mean, for us, or at least for me, and I'm sure for you too, like Romero was kind of like the pinnacle of like horror directors and directors for that matter. But like, I wonder if he would have had a run in the '90s where he made like some movies that were proposed to get made.
mm,
If he wouldn't be on the level of like a fucking Scorsese or something like that, you know what I mean? Like if there wouldn't have been something where he would have like where he would have
honestly,
had like his giant film like breakthrough in that time period.
I honestly don't think so. I think by the '90s, he was I mean, you just look at Carpenter, you look at Craven, and I mean, Craven, of course, had his resurgence with Scream, but
Yeah.
that's to me, Scream is uh, just as much Kevin Williamson as it is Craven. I mean, they kind of needed each other to make that movie
Yeah.
work.
Scream is probably more Kevin Williamson, if anything. Yeah.
Yeah. But to me, I feel like George's opportunity to kind of ascend to that level would have been in the early '80s. I think the thing like Creepshow, I love Creepshow, and it was a success. It was his only number one hit. But I think after Creepshow and kind of getting tied to Stephen King, that he just kind of got pigeonholed as a horror director after that. And he never directed anything other than horror. And that's all he was allowed to direct. That's all he could direct. But if you
Yeah.
look before Creepshow, I mean, he was really more of an experimental indie filmmaker. I mean, all
Yeah.
those titles from the 70s, I mean, yeah, there are horror elements to them, but they're not your typical horror movies. Yeah, Night Riders, Martin is a horror film, sort of. I mean, but it's not your typical
Yeah.
vampire story. It's more of a coming of age boy with a lot of fucking problems story.
Yep.
Season of the Witch, we talked about earlier. Crazies is kind of just more of like a weird sci-fi, pandemic movie. I don't know what the fuck you call it, but George had the ability to kind of do things outside of the horror genre. Whereas after Creepshow, he was just kind of like George Romero, the zombie guy, and
Yeah.
that's kind
Well,
of
I mean, to be honest, I feel like there's a couple of guys like that, like Carpenter too. I mean, they gave him the opportunity to make films outside the horror genre,
mm-hmm,
and a lot of them kind of flopped, and he just kind of got like stuck in
mm-hmm,
that same thing. Not to say that Romero's would have flopped or anything like that, but I'm just saying like it's hard to get out of that
yeah,
once you're in it for any of them. Like I don't think any of them did really well with
yeah,
films outside of that genre.
yeah. It's true. Craven, of course, did
The Meryl
Music of the
Streep.
Heart.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. I
And
don't know how that
that's
did the
about
box
the
office.
most notable one, really, if you think about it, like, of all
Yeah,
those guys.
I don't know. I feel like George in his heart of hearts, if you would have asked him what career he would have wanted to have had, I think he would have loved to have been. I think he really looked up to a guy like Brian De Palma. I think he wanted to be on that level of a guy that's just universally respected,
Yeah.
but was able to do a variety of different types of movies, and was allowed to. But I think after Creepshow, I feel like George just was like, oh, he's just the horror guy. He's the Stephen
Yep.
King guy.
It
Uh,
is a shame too, man, because, like, a lot of those early movies that he made that weren't necessarily just like horror films, like, if he would have had a budget and the opportunity to do things like that later on, I feel like that would have been amazing.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. I mean, he tried. There were certain, there was I forget what the hell it was. But it was just like a drama, like a political drama or something like that he was trying to get off. I think had like Ed Harris. I think Pacino, I think, was involved. I can't remember what the hell it was called, but he tried, but like it's I mean, that's the whole reason his last three films were zombie movies. I mean, he didn't
yeah.
want to make just zombie movies, but that's all they would let him make. So he would say, okay, I'll put zombies in it, but I really want to just tell a Western about,
Yeah.
so I don't know. Who's to say? That's Tom
Yeah,
Atkins.
yeah. Maybe he would, maybe he wouldn't. Who's to say?
Who's to say? But overall, Bruiser, what are your thoughts on Bruiser? Where would you put it in his catalog?
Well, yeah, it rapidly, like, ascended my list of his movies, like, after the last 2 times that I've watched it, which have been within the last year.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I you know, um, I really enjoy movies like this anyway, psychological kinda like, aspect, movies like this where it's more about the character and than it is about, 1,000 different people dying and
Yeah.
things like that. But, that being said, like, I'm not sure that I would put it above any of the Dead movies or, like, Martin or even the Crazies for that matter. I'm just a huge fan of the Crazies. Like, I think that
Mm-hmm.
movie is, like, incredibly underrated for what it is, so
Especially when you watch it after going through COVID, and you're like, "Oh
yeah,
wow, George,
yeah,
George, George knew how this would all happen."
yep,
Like we would just all be freaking the fuck out, and that would be the
yeah,
downfall. Was
yeah, and
us,
the
not the
government
disease.
would come in and, yeah, fuck everything up, and yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Um,
somewhere after those movies is where I would put it. So, whatever that would be, 5th, 6th, something like that.
I would say I'd go on a limb. I think I told Synth in a Texas. I think to me it's his best movie after Day of the Dead. And I have a lot of I totally understand. The Dark Half is a very well made good movie. Monkey Shines is a very well made good movie. But for me, for what I like, for my taste, for what I look for in a Romero film, like I see Romero in that film. I see a lot of Romero in
Yeah,
Bruiser.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't really get that in Monkey Shine. Like I understand it's a very well made movie. It's very good, but it's based on somebody else's story. Same with The Dark Half. It's a
Yeah.
Stephen King story. Whereas Bruiser is a George story. It's Romero saying, "I got to get this out," you know.
Yeah.
And
And
that's what I love about it.
a really interesting take on how that too.
Hmm.
I mean, aside from the fact that it's very personal and it's like you said, like probably mirroring like what was going on with him, it's just an interesting idea as
Yeah.
well. That they use that mask and everything to kind of symbolize like what's going on with the character in that way. Um, so yeah, like I like it a ton more now than I did, 10, 15
Yeah.
years ago.
I remember
Uh,
going back and listening to those episodes. You guys are like, "Oh,
yeah.
that fucking Bruiser. Who the fuck would ever
Yeah,
watch that again?"
it just like I said, it just and I feel like it's one of those movies. Sorcerer is another movie, by the way, that I don't think you're not going to get anything or not as much out of that movie when you're 20 as you
Hmm.
will when you're like 40. Like it's just
Right.
not going to happen because that about what that movie's about. And there's a bunch of movies like that, and I
Oh
think this is
yeah.
one of them.
There's
Yeah,
so many movies that I remember watching younger that I just didn't get. I go back and watch now, and I'm like, "Holy shit! This is speaking to me on a different level now." I don't
yeah,
understand,
yeah.
but
But I
oh,
mean, if I love this movie. Like if I had to rate it, I would give it a solid 7 or 8. It would be somewhere in there. Like, I think it's that good.
yeah. I mean, like I said, when I first saw it, it's always been up there for me because there's aspects of it that I've always liked, like the Misfits. I've always been a big Misfits fan, especially in high school. I was a punk
Yeah.
rock kid, had Misfits, fucking everything. So the fact that he had the Misfits in this movie, I was like, "Oh, this is awesome." But actually understanding what the hell he was talking, where he was coming from,
Mhm.
I totally agree. I think you have to be older. You need a little bit more experience. You need to understand, like, okay, I get it, but yeah. So I think again, the older I get, the more I watched. I'm just like, yeah, there's a lot here that I can just I really dig my teeth into.
Yeah. I love
Um,
the we didn't really talk about this, but, like, going in with that too, I love the fantasy aspect of it where, like, he'll be in the middle of something and he'll, like, have the fantasy that, you know,
mhm.
that he shoots him there's the one where he shoots himself, there's the one he throws the lady on the tracks, and there's the one where he, like, he just all the way through the movie, he's having these little, like, fantasy, like, things until it blends in with reality and he actually kills the woman and all that happens, to set up the mask.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, and that's a cool part of the movie too. Like, you're blurring the lines between reality and fantasy and kinda about what's going on. So you don't really ever know, like, if that's I mean, I still knowing now, like, what George thought it was, like, I still enjoy watching the movie not knowing, is this real?
Yeah.
Is this really going on, or is this some sort of weird fantasy? Is this a, dreamscape? Yeah.
Some fever dream. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, Let me hit some comments here real quick, and I'll let you get out of here, UB. I appreciate your time, man. This has been a lot of fun. I
Yeah.
really appreciate you hanging out with me on a Saturday night. Now, this is what I call a Bruiser.
Smooth, yeah.
What the hell is she?
Oh.
Um,
I had never really heard that term either
what
until this
Bruiser?
movie. Yeah, that it was, like,
I
in the
haven't
way that it
either.
was used, yeah.
Yeah. It's a weird name for the magazine. Grande saying, really enjoyed Bruiser. I would say rewatching it today, I felt some of the editing was a little sporadic, but the message does remain true. The horrors of being stepped on is something many can relate to. Jason Fleming is really good in it, in my opinion. Love the Misfits song, Descending Angel. Yeah, when they're first going in there, Descending Angel. Oh, and the guy that's playing like the jester or whatever, that's like letting everybody in.
That's
Um,
Billy,
um,
what's his name?
Boyd Banks.
Boyd Banks, yeah.
Boyd Banks. He was in the Dawn remake, Land of
He's
the
in Land of
Dead.
the Dead as the Cleaver zombie,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And the little boy that's on the shoulders with this, he's got the
Yeah,
little wand
yeah.
thing. That's George's son, Drew, actually.
Oh, yeah.
I'm actually friends on Facebook with him. So it's fun seeing him as a little kid.
Is he the one that has the restaurant and all that shit?
No, that's Cameron. That's
Oh, okay.
Jordan. Who actually I think he's the one that directed Staunton Hill back in. I don't remember if you remember that back in the day on DVD, but that was a blockbuster staple. I remember seeing like, holy shit, George's Kid. Then you
Mhm.
watch it and you're like, I don't know about it.
I never saw it, so I have to, like, check that out, yeah.
You didn't
Or
miss
not.
much.
Yeah.
Um Here's a good point from Synth. He's really an extension of Henry, Hal Holbrook's character in Creepshow, frustrated and angry at his lot in life as a meek person being taken advantage of. Yeah, because in
Yeah.
Creepshow, Hal Holbrook's character kind of daydreams about getting revenge on old Billy.
Yeah. Well, it's really just Holbrook's character is really just his damn wife. You know what I mean? Like nothing else is
Yeah.
really except her.
Yeah.
In Bruiser, it's everything. Like
Yeah,
everything wants to
it's
fucking
everybody. Yeah. Everybody is Billy in the fucking Bruiser. Let's see. Larry saying, I once had a phone conversation with Bruiser producer Ben Barinholtz, and he had some very interesting things to say about Bruiser and Romero and Chris Romero, but I really can't say them publicly.
that adds a whole other
There's a
element onto it,
tease.
doesn't it?
There's a tease. Granted, saying a lady playing the cover girl that won the selection was the worst actress I've ever seen in one of George's films, and that includes Leda Dyer. Yeah, she.
Yeah,
but I think she's meant to be kind of over the top, ditzy. You know, I'm the cover girl type of. But yeah, I agree. That did kind of stand out while I was watching it too.
By the way, of those 10 people, like who the fuck would have picked that girl? Like,
Yeah,
I mean, there's like several pictures that I saw in there that were much better than that. But whatever.
You know. Sorry to be cryptic. I can say them in person, maybe in a book one day, just not publicly. No. Okay, all right. Yeah. No worries, man. No worries. Since I just saw an ad for Jason Big Gay Monkey Shine's cop show while watching the Olympics. Yeah, he's on something. All right, Larry, quit dropping the fucking
Jesus Christ, dude. If you're gonna go on like this, then we need to know some of this.
Yeah, I'm gonna get you on next week. We're gonna be spilling all the damn beans, Larry. Come on now. Let's see. Granted, I thought Peter was a little too much. Granted, the line of the movie is, "What do you think? I was taking the shit of a lifetime." Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely much, but I appreciate it. I like it. You start saying the different perspective than you could ever get from fans, more of a coworker perspective. Okay, that's interesting. Stormare's best is Fargo, great in Big Lebowski too. Yeah. Stormare. I mean, he's just a great actor all around. I think in this, I think he was just kind of because the way Jason Fleming was talking in that interview, just kind of George would just kind of let actors kind of, and to the point where Jason Fleming at one point was just kind of like, yeah, I kind of wish George would have told me to do it a different way because he wasn't happy with the way that he did it, but George was fine with it. So I don't know. But George would just kind of let you go and go wild.
Yeah, I mean, there's parts in there where he talks about, that Stormare would be standing off the edge before he would come into a scene, and nobody really knew what he was going to do. Like he would just make shit up as he was standing there, and then walk into the scene and just do it. And like people were like, "What?" Like there's the scene where he walks, he's having the party or whatever, and he just pushes the guy into the pool. That was completely like just whatever. He smacks the kid in the back of the head.
That part always fucking cracks me up. He just smacks the kid in the back of the head as he's walking up.
Yeah.
I know for a fact the fucking the ball scene.
Oh yeah.
That was totally ad libbed. He was like, I had no idea that he was going to do that, but it worked. Okay, granted, the lady playing Jason Fleming's wife is so hot, but she really couldn't really act. Okay, I like both aspects.
I thought she did okay. Yeah, she was hot, and
there were aspects of her that I thought were a little wooden. I'll say that, but I think for the most part, I feel like she kind of hit.
Not Simon Baker wooden though.
Yeah,
that's oak tree fucking wooden there.
Poor Simon Baker. That's the Mentalist you're talking about there, sir. God, they actually gave him his own fucking TV show, believe it or not.
Well, that's great, but he's like, I would hate this. I've never seen an episode of that show, thankfully.
Here's a good idea. Stukas has finally had a couple. How about a Home Alone Dawn crossover? Dawn of Kevin McAllister, Bloodlines. There you go. Perfect.
Yeah. I see what you mean now. Okay.
You can tell when he's cracked a few open here. But that's not a bad idea. I mean, really, Home Alone could be a horror movie if done right, for sure. Since saying Bruiser is my least favorite Rubenstein score, I'd say so too. I mean, other than that long lost Dawn score, that's just out there. Like, I don't know how the hell that would have been incorporated. I can understand why George was kind of like, "Don't worry about it, Don. We'll get you the next round. You can do Night Riders. Don't worry about it." It's just
It's my least favorite type of score too, to be honest. Like that kind of jazz improvisational score
yeah.
stuff. I just don't like that.
Well, I think it works really well in Night Riders because it fits that Camelot feel. Like it works there, and it's got that
Yeah.
the song "I'd Rather Be a Wanderer," which is just a great song, and it works in Martin because there are a few scenes in Martin where it's just kind of like, yeah, it's a little silly, but the way George would kind of slow it down or speed it
Yeah.
up,
Yeah.
I think really helped that out a lot. Let's see. Larry saying Iron City Asking was on YouTube for a decade until it was released on DVD. Might still be out there. Not sure if it. Well, I can tell you this. I put it up on my channel. That's one of the first things I did. I put it up on my channel, and I actually got an email from Jason, who's JB Destiny, who was George's assistant all those years, asking me to take it down. And I was just like, "Oh, sure, no problem." I was
Yeah.
like, "No problem, man." That same thing happened to me with that OJ Simpson documentary, Juice on the
Oh yeah.
Loose.
Yeah.
I put that up, and the estate
You shit,
of
man. They're not gonna let you put that up. I know that one.
yeah, it didn't last long. The estate of Bill and Bonnie Heinzman, who actually own all of the Winners documentaries, they emailed me and was like, "Hey, could you please take it down?" Like, yeah, sure, no problem. And then he messaged me back and was like, "Are you related to George?" I'm like, "No, Alpha is not my real name. No, it's it's like my name
Yeah.
is not Alpha
Yeah.
Romero."
Yeah.
They're like,
His
"Oh,
long
okay,
lost
that's cool."
cousin.
Yeah. Rambo's in the house. What's up, man?
Oh
Rambo
wow.
Rap for life. That happened. One of the releases did John Carpenter's The Thing. The DVD. Okay, the DVD commentary is uncut, but the newer Blu-ray editions would edit certain things like references to Laserdisc or other stuff. I have heard
Yeah.
of that actually. Um, which those are great commentaries too. Anytime you get John Carpenter and Kurt Russell on a commentary together,
Yeah.
it's always
Oh yeah.
gold.
But yeah, if anybody on here is curious, like if you get a chance, just watch the movie with the commentary on and get an idea what I'm talking about. Like, and I'd love to know what the story is behind that.
Yeah. I'll have to go back and listen to that DVD, like if it's actually like that on that actual original DVD commentary. Larry saying if there are music differences, it's because of rights. May not have been able to find the rights owner and able to. Okay, that's interesting. It's
Yeah.
always the case. Nobody would change the director's OG vision. Well, I wouldn't say nobody. Uh, Disney is out there lurking in the shadows. Uh, Grant is saying "Take on Me" cover in the trailer too. Yeah, that's true.
Not you mentioned it, that does suck.
Take.
I never really thought
I
about it
never
like that
got
much
it. Like
until you said that.
I never got it. I didn't quite understand. They're saying I heard a lot of the old commentaries being censored, legal reasons or other. Yeah, that could be true too. Um, the laser they would never allow lethal laser like that in the club. No permit in the world would allow it. It has to be a dream
Yeah.
or fantasy. That's true. Maybe I don't know. It seemed like a bit of an underground. I don't think they got permits or anything to do that. Okay, since De Palma not that respected, known as Hitchcock copycat in his earlier movies, some other homages as well. Interesting. Okay. I've always felt like De Palma was pretty. I mean, I know George
I
himself would always say like,
yeah.
I think De Palma's great. Like I wish I could be De Palma type of thing.
I think that you know what I think actually got him more respected as of late was Tarantino saying that he was his favorite filmmaker. I
Yeah,
think that gave him like a second kind of life as well. So I think he's probably more respected now than he was even back then.
for sure. Yeah. Um, since the Crazies is great, super low budget but fun, a bit prescient.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Grant is saying, yeah, Bruiser is better than Monkey Shines in the Dark Half. I'd put it over the last 3 Dead movies too. Actually, I do too.
I
Like I said,
I would too.
I think it's his best. I think it's his best movie post Day of the Dead. I do because I just feel like it is George. Um, since saying he likes Land more than Bruiser, but not by much. Yeah, I mean, so are you just anti Land of the Dead? Are you not a Land of the Dead fan at all, or because
Me?
yeah, because I wanted to love Land of the Dead, but I
I did
just
too. Like, if you okay, so imagine this, right? So when that movie came out in the theaters, like I went to see it with my dad, and it was like, this is the dude that got me into like Dawn of the Dead. That was his favorite film. We were both like super hyped. We went to the
mhm.
theater together, and we're in there, and we're like, I just remember in the middle of it just being like, God, this is not that good. Like, this is not like,
This is not what I was expecting.
no, this
Yeah.
is not that good. So we were like both really disappointed when we left, and we talked about it, and it was like that was not it. So we
Yeah.
were, yeah,
Well, I think that's also kind of the same response that Bruiser kind of got because it was George's first movie back after 7 or 8 year hiatus,
yeah.
and it just wasn't what people were wanting. So, um,
No, I mean I can imagine that too. Like,
Alpha and my brother Beta, yeah, Alpha Romero and Beta Romero, that's us. But man, I really appreciate you coming on. We've been going on damn near 3 hours tonight. I didn't expect you to keep you this long, but once we got conversation going, and I got so much more that I could cover. So anytime you want to come back on, man, you're more than welcome. Door's always open.
yeah, I mean we didn't even really get into the other Romero movies, which
No,
we need to do that at some
we
point.
your favorite movie's Dawn of the Dead. I see you got that beautiful green letter original one sheet behind you there.
Yeah,
We barely talked about Dawn of the Dead tonight, so
yeah. I've got probably my favorite thing that I own of any of my horror stuff. I've got back there too on that shelf, which is it's the Dawn of the Dead head,
mhm.
from the poster that was sculpted by Tasso Stavrakis's it's his brother, maybe?
Oh yeah, Chris Stavrakis.
Stavrakis, yeah. And it's signed like by pretty much everybody on the cast as well. And like it sits like flat, but the head part is like carved out.
Oh wow.
So like, yeah, that's probably my favorite thing. But yeah, I'll
Yeah,
talk about
we're gonna have to get you back on just to show that off because I'd love to see that. You know the bust, the George bust in the Monroeville Mall. Do you know
yes,
about that?
yeah, the one that they showed.
That's Chris Stavrakis is
Yeah.
where he sculpted that. So, but
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, man.
that was a Slippy original that Slippy sold to me back when he was doing the auctions,
I
15
love
years
when he
ago.
does those auctions, man.
Yeah.
He'll still do them every now and then on Facebook, but he needs to sell some more shit.
He does. But yeah, I'll come
Mm.
back on whenever you want and talk about anything related to Romero. Yeah, for sure.
Well, awesome, man. I really appreciate it. And everybody, if you're for whatever goddamn reason that you're not subscribed to Dead Pit on YouTube, go subscribe at Dead Pit. Check them out, deadpit.com. They have a Patreon. You can go back and listen, like I did, to their entire catalog, starting all the way from the beginning, all the way back in the long past 2005. So many interviews, so much that these guys have done and paved the way for assholes like me to hop on here and flap my gums about George Romero for hours at a time every week. So,
Yeah.
so thanks a lot, man. I really appreciate it. We'll see you somewhere down the line. Hope everybody has a great rest of the night, a great rest of the week. Hold on, let me get this queued up. All right. And as always, stay scared.